And welcome to the Darkness to Light Godcast. My name is Jim McFadyen. I am in the Vortex Centre for Wellbeing here in Scotland, right in the centre of Scotland. Vortex opened in 2016 after a long road, my own long intentional journey. And this podcast, this Godcast, as I'm calling it, is the extension of the work I've been doing over the last 27 years now. This is my 27th year working on this stuff. And as we get into this, as we move forward, if you stick around long enough and you get to know me and you get to understand and learn, for some of you it will be new, so you will be learning. But you get to learn and then, more importantly, experience the things that I'm talking about. And then before I came on, I'm just thinking about what's the intention with this, why am I doing it, what's my reason, what's my why, as with everything, why are you doing it? And the intention with all this work is to help people. The intention is to share the stuff that I've picked up along the way on my own journey and pass them on to people. I do believe that once you master yourself, once you get it for yourself, then you need to pass it on, you need to pay it forward, especially just now. And especially in this work, the amount of people that are suffering and struggling just now. This is spring of 2024 up here in Scotland. It's still freezing cold this morning, never ending winter. And it feels like a kind of winter of discontent in the world just now. There's a lot of stuff going on just now that isn't the way that it's meant to be, I do believe. And this journey that we're about to go on together is all about my take on the world and the ways of the world and the problems that we face in the world, and then also, most importantly, the solutions and how we make it better. That's what it needs to be about at this time for me. It's how we make it better. What's the solutions, the SoulUtions? How do we find answers? How do we help people find relief? How do we help people find their way to a better way of living? Again, the way it's meant to be. I do believe we human beings, we come into this world, this time-space reality, as children of God, some would say. I feel that way myself. I do believe we come in quite unique and very special because we carry a piece of that divine inside of us, and that gets lost almost from the very beginning. And then no matter what it is, what you're going through this life as, in terms of how you're making your way through it, your human experience, I do feel that it can be the way it's meant to be, which would be better for most people. So that's the intention with this work. All of my work through the Vortex, all of my own professional work, it's been over the last couple of years. I've been doing this a long time. Opened the centre in 2016. The journey actually began in 1996, and it took me a long time to get to a point where I was ready, and a whole load of different circumstances that unfolded that allowed me to get to a place where I actually opened this centre up. In the beginning, it was just to share. An extension of what I was doing at the time was sharing, helping people. My job at the time was basically, I was in loads of different houses day to day, and I'd just be talking to people. I'd be sharing the things that I'd picked up along the way in terms of my own journey with mental health and physical health, the things that I'd been working on for a long time. By this point, getting into kind of 2015, 2016, that was probably almost 20 years into my journey by that point. And the things that I was learning, the things I was sharing with people, what I was finding was it was helping them find relief. So the way this centre came about and the reasons and the intention behind it was just an extension of that, was to make it more visible and more public so that people could get around about it and start to learn the things that I'd picked up. A lot of stuff that I teach, almost all of the stuff that I teach is, it's original, in terms of it's been there forever. It's the way that it's meant to be. Original, you think of the concept of original in terms of, it's mine, original, something I've come up with is original to me. And these tools and techniques and practices and principles, they're original to the way of the universe. And a lot of that has been forgotten. In fact, almost all of it has been forgotten. When you look at the world just now, the circus as I call it, sometimes I call it the zoo, depending on where I am. And I think going through this, you're going to see very many different versions of me. Today, right here, right now, I am just off the back of some kind of incredible expansion over the last few days. I'm on a healing journey. This journey for me is a healing journey. That's what it's been about since the summer of 1996 when I almost lost my life. I'm going to be talking a lot about that and the lessons that have been, both before it obviously, but more so after it. And the things that I learned along the way with my own journey. The first 10 years was absolutely a healing journey to heal my physical body, first and foremost, to heal my emotional body. The emotions and the damage that we take in this lifetime. Certainly what I went through, there's different ways we get damaged. Physical, emotional, mental damage, absolutely. The amount of mental health challenges that we are facing just now as a species, as a people, it's like a spectrum. There are so few people that you could probably count them in one hand in your own life if you're lucky. The people who are going through this life, without any mental health challenges in terms of anxiety, in terms of depression, overwhelmment. People that are suffering, with stress. People that are struggling to sleep, people that are living in fear, people that are living in worry. You start to learn about how this stuff goes together, and you start to see the negative impact that all that has on us. And then you look at the world and you see the way that it is just now, in terms of so many people are in that space. Then neither wonder that we're finding ourselves where we are just now in 2024. Some feel on the brink of world war. I pray to God and hope that doesn't happen. The consequences of such an event, people don't really fully comprehend, I don't feel. And you're talking about nuclear war. Conventional war is bad enough. You think about, what the soldiers. I think of my dad and the stories he told about his dad coming back. My granddad just missed the war. One of them was in the war, one of them just missed the Second World War. And you think of the hardship and the lack that they come back to, men coming back from the war and families that obviously had to be raised by the single mums, the men that were lost at war. That's bad enough. Even you think the things that went on during those conventional war with the conventional weapons, knives and bayonets and bullets and bombs and the different gases and all that kind of stuff. You take that to where we are just now, and these, which have been about for a long time, but you think of nuclear war and nuclear weapons, and the detrimental effect that would obviously have, on not just us but the planet. And they're talking about, when you look into it, like 250,000 years for the planet to get back to any kind of way that it should be. Is terrifying. So the hour is late. We as a species are under pressure just now, as is almost every species on the planet when you think of that kind of stuff. The amount of animals and insects and bugs that are going extinct every single day. You see what we're doing to the environment. You see some of the pictures from around the world, even here in Scotland, which is fairly evolved and civilised, but you see the amount of waste that's created every single day by all of us. And you see the damage that we're doing to the environment, nature, the rivers, the oceans. It's not going too well for us as a species, so something has to give, something needs to change. And the problem that we face when you look to the environment is that there's not many answers. There are not that many solutions. When you go online and you look at any of these gurus, the kind of self-help guys, normally you find is they're in it for themselves. Normally you find is they're trying to sell something. This is sponsorship, and the way they're trying to do it is to get it for themselves, which is so limited. I do believe just now, if you're not in this for the greatest good, especially those who are involved in this work, if you're not in this for the greatest good and you're not trying to get it for the goodness of all, in terms of mankind, then you're not where you need to be. And if you're still in it for yourself, and you're still trying to be the man, and get it for yourself, then that's something that I have huge challenges with. There's quite a few things I've got huge challenges with, and that'll be one of them, especially people in this work, the so-called, light workers and the coaches that are very much in it for themselves, especially since the last couple of years. People that have had an awakening and an awakened experience after COVID, in the space and the time that we got to kind of stop and take stock and see where we are. A lot of people, for the first time, couldn't go to the pubs, couldn't go to the football, basically trapped in their own homes, and we're forced to kind of stop and take stock, and that's been a fantastic. It sounds crazy, but it's been so beneficial to so many people. It's been obviously massively detrimental to so many people. This fallout, we are obviously still seeing it. but it's going to be there forever. The world has changed forever at this point. But one of the good things, if there are any that came out of it, was this people that waking up, this awakened, awake, not really the woke society. I don't believe the whole truther movement and people that's not the kind of waking up that I'm talking about. But in terms of people taking stock and realising that their life and the way that they were doing it wasn't working and didn't work, and it's not the way that it's meant to be. So many people stopped and realised they were really, really unhappy, and a lot of them were on this kind of runaway train of trying to get somewhere that they realised probably wasn't in their best interest. So the solutions is what I'm interested in. Helping people who are on this path. It's not going to be for everybody. I am not here to sell it to anybody. I'm not here to give it to anybody. This isn't my way. I have learned a lot of really cool stuff along the way. The way I'm talking about is in alignment with, I believe, the divine, whatever that means to you. For me, God is a field of infinite possibilities. It's a field of divine perfection where nothing ever goes wrong. Very difficult to explain or express in words. I believe that divine way, that divine nature, that divine essence that we call God, I believe everything comes through it. Again, this is all based on my own direct experience. And the stuff I'm talking about, I'm going to explain it as we go. I have been in two sides of the fence. This podcast is Darkness to Light. My story is Darkness to Light. I started in the west of Scotland just as a normal guy. I've grown up in a working class family, a really successful working class family. My dad started with nothing. Both my mum and my dad came from very humble beginnings after the Second World War. And really through necessity, but also, the desire to better themselves and to give us the stuff that they never had growing up. We as a family, work hard, play hard, earn the money to buy the things, to be successful. That's what I grew up in. I was never handed anything. I've never been given anything. I've always had to work for stuff. Most of my life, my parents were very, very, very good to me and my brother in so many different ways. But we always knew the value, and I always knew the value in work. We were never spoiled, although from the outside it would probably be perceived that we were, but we always had proper, good Christian values, I suppose, growing up. I grew up as a good Catholic, whatever that means, but in organised religion, going to church every week. The family was hugely important. I believe it's one of the biggest challenges we face just now as a people. The breaking up of that sacred, unit, the mum, the dad, the Waynes. Back when I grew up, my dad went to work every single day. He did a lot of work, he had a lot of different businesses, hugely successful. Mum was obviously part of that as well, but the main role back then was for the mum to look after the Waynes in the house, be the keep the home. And it seemed to work, and it wasn't until I was probably primary school when I heard my first divorce, probably primary 6, primary 7, when things like divorce and people splitting up seemed to make its way to Scotland. It'd been there a long time previously in Scotland, in America, but in Scotland there was really none of that. It was unusual. I think I had one lad in our primary school who grew up without a dad. The mum and dad had split up. And looking back and thinking back about him and the way that he was, even now from what I know now, you could see how the negative impact, and that negative impact, again, some would say possibly by design, has been done. And there's nothing wrong with the whole empowering women and male movement, empowering women to go and get it for themselves and and basically achieve what they need to achieve in this life. But I've watched it over a long time in terms of how the family unit, how it seemed to work for most people, and then we look at where it is just now, and I see it very often. I wouldn't say every single day, but a lot of the times, especially over the last kind of 5, 6, 7 years with this work, the amount of particularly young males, females as well, but particularly young males, how it's been growing up without a dad normally, and being raised by a mum a lot of times who was in 2 jobs or 3 jobs trying to put food on the table and make it all work. The negative impact, those young males and females as well, growing up in an environment that's a wee bit too lopsided one way, So there's many things, many subjects I would like to speak about. I'm just giving my take on it. This is my perspective. You can either take it or you can leave it. It's no my way, it's the way, I do believe. And the stuff that I share, especially relating to mental health and physical well-being, and latterly when we start to talk about spiritual well-being. These ways, what they do is they make everything better, and that's what I'm all about. I am absolutely an appreciator. My intention is to make things better, so that anybody that wants to come and fight, and anybody that wants to come and prove me wrong, and anybody that wants to come and have a go, I refuse to fight, not with this stuff, especially for people who don't really know what I'm talking about. It's going to be very easy for somebody to look in and say that I'm off my nut. It's going to be very easy for somebody to look in and have a go, and try and prove me wrong, and prove themselves right, and that's not what this is all about. I refuse to fight. I've been on social media since 2016 when I started. This place opened in 2016, and that's when I really went online and became public, again with that desire to help people, but right from the very beginning. And when you start to learn more about this system as to how I live my life, which I call the program, there is a program within the Vortex, and the program's all about intentional living. And that program, you need to be aware of how things make you feel. And my intention is to feel good at all times. I believe human beings are supposed to feel good. So the people that come, anybody who trolls, anybody who hates, anybody who has a go, I'm not going to play. So they will be blocked and taken out instantly. The whole thing about keeping people in about it, and everybody's got obviously the ability to express their views and freedom of speech. I'm all about that. But it needs to be in a certain way, and if it's just for the sake of it, are people really coming through ignorance or having a go because they don't know what it is, then that's something that at this stage and this time that we're in, where there isn't a lot of time, I don't really feel. So anybody that's coming with any of that kind of stuff, I'm not going to play, I'm not going to fight, I'm not going to fight my corner so that I can be right and you can be wrong, and the same is true the other way around. The need for you to be right, I'm not going to do that, so they will be stopped and taken out. That's important to know. They'll be stopped and blocked instantly. I am only interested in those who are, number one, in it for the greatest good, absolutely, to get this planet and us as a species back on our feet. That's paramount as we go forward, and anything that's separate from that, I'm not really interested in. And all the stuff I'm going to be talking about, all the solutions, are a result of my own journey. I've been on a healing journey since 1996. Probably the damage that was done before that, leading up in 1986, I was 24, 25 years old when this journey began. It's very interesting for me to be sitting talking about this, and still uncomfortable, especially with the kind of stage stuff, sitting with the camera recording with the mic and just me and the Doug. Very different if it's live recordings, in terms of if I'm speaking to, whether it's one person or it's 1,000 people through my work. That seems to be a lot easier. It seems to be a lot more off the cuff. This is getting a wee bit easier, but it's still very staged and a wee bit of struggle. I'm hoping, and I kind of feel and I know that it's going to get easier as we go, and it's going to change and it's going to evolve as we go. The intention is to help people. The intention is to get this information out there and to help as many people as we can, as fast as we can with this work. Really, really simple. That's my primary intention. And before we get into that, the first video, certainly this first clip, is going to be about explaining who I am and what it is that I do. I think that's important. I think any teacher, anybody who's passing on information, you need to know where they're coming from. There are so many just now who basically go to a weekend workshop where they read a book and then they've got all the answers, and because it's helped them, then they intend to give it to other people. That's with the best intentions, fantastic, and well done to them. But this stuff that I'm talking about here, this is something that's been the result of, this is my 27th year working on this. I'm 52 years old now. When I went through my life-changing experience, I was 24, 25, summer of 1996. And there's been no real stone unturned in terms of this holistic path that I'm on, holistic health and well-being, which is what this is all about. I had a very privileged life up until the summer of 1996, and then after the summer of 1996, everything changed. And I'm going to be talking about the journey before 1996 and how I got to that place. And I'm also going to be talking about the last 26 and a bit years of my own, very different path in terms of who I was before it and then who I became, and I'm still becoming after it. I am on a healing journey just now, there's no question about it. I'm still healing myself. Some of the stuff, especially childhood stuff, especially when you look at different traumas and things that we go through at different stages of your life, some of that can take a bit of time to heal, as I know, and many layers to the onion, as I share with my students. You think you've dealt with something, especially the heavier stuff. because of my own experiences, I seem to attract a lot of the heavier stuff, and there's many layers to that, in terms of how it affects us in different ways, how it affects us mentally, how it affects us on a physical level, how it affects the heart, how it affects the soul, how it can affect your spirit. And this work, what I've seen with myself, it's all about transcendence. It's all about getting beyond, no matter what it is that you're dealing with. That's the plan. That's the absolute plan with all of it, is to help people get to that place where they don't just have to live with it anymore, but they can absolutely reach that place of transcendence and get beyond it, no matter what it is. The challenges we face just now relating to, mental health, physical health and well-being, the challenges with addiction, the challenges that people are suffering day to day with trauma. I believe there's a way to get beyond all of it, and I believe there is absolutely a system, my system that I designed for myself. People need to find their own way of doing that. I'm never going to give this to anybody. I'm never ever going to say this is how you need to do it, this is the way to do it. But I do believe there's certain things that we can be doing that will help us find the best set of circumstances within your own personal life, so you can start to navigate through whatever it is you're dealing with, and then get to that place that I do feel is available for all of us. Darkness to light, to stand in the light, the realisation of all that we are as a people, as a human being. Who you are as a human being is a great question. So many people are soul searching just now. So many people are separated from themselves. So many people are separated from their souls. So who you are, and possibly more importantly what you are, is a bit that I'm interested in. The reconnection back to all that we are as a people. That's how I feel that we make this world and this time that we are in just now, how we make it better. I could talk all day about the problems of the world. I choose not to spend any time there. Probably going forward, I will be putting my 2 bits in about the different kind of specific situations. But it's always to do with the solutions. It's always to do with how we fix it. And a lot of the times I will shine a light on something. I put my attention into something just to see where it is. I did that probably 10 years ago when I was made aware of the challenges of the world and the things that we face, the challenges that we're facing. And that was really, really very, very difficult for me to go through that and see the horrors of the world. And I see just now, the amount of truthers, especially over the last few years, that are coming out and they're calling out all the stuff that's going on within the world. And I think it's important to see where it is and to see how bad it is. But also, really, really quickly, how we fix it, what's the solutions, how do we make it better? Once you know how bad it is, which I think you need to see to begin with, but then, once you see it, then it's about how we make it better. And that's what this is all about, the solutions. What are the solutions? How do we make it better? And the problem and the solution are two very different places and two very different spaces. And where we spend our time, what your focus is on, when you start to get on about this and you start to realise how things work and start to learn, how things go together, then where you're putting your focus, what you're putting your time into, that can make things, obviously better or worse. If you put so much time into your worries and into your stresses and into your strains, and all you do is think about, how bad it is and where you've went wrong, that's, for most people, that's mental health. Something happens, a significant event will happen, and then they spend the rest of their life thinking about it. And if you start to dig that hole, and you don't have the awareness to realise what you're doing to yourself and the ability to stop, and then get beyond it, then some people dig that hole and they never get out of it. I've been running about enough people, and I've heard of enough people taking their own lives and suiciding because they start digging that hole and they think there's no way out, and they just keep going and going and going, and they never get a break from it. And then before you know it, it gets to the point of hopelessness where there is no way out. And at that point, when people start to when they take their lives, then obviously that would be the very nth degree of that whole process. So that's something I believe, for me, things that I've been through, speaking from my own experience relating to mental health and the challenges that I faced, and being in a place I would call hopelessness for anybody who's never been there. It's hugely challenging. I see people with mental health challenges almost every single day. And one of my first questions is, right, how bad is it? Where are you? Is it just a wee bit kind of slight anxiety? Are you feeling a wee bit down? Is it you feeling a wee bit low? Or is it right up to that place of hopelessness where there's no hope and there's no reason to go forward to the point where you want to end your life? So there's a whole spectrum of that. And what I see with this work, what I see with these tools and techniques, things like, basically learning to breathe properly and learning to manage your nervous system, learning to switch off the stress, giving yourself a break from you, switching off the head, switching off the mind. These are really basic fundamentals that really every kid should know. You should be taught that by the time you're in probably primary 1 or primary 2. The ability to manage your nervous system and your stress response and being aware of how your body works. So much of that is, whether it's done by design, but I certainly know that not enough people know enough about it. And what I see when you basically teach somebody to breathe with function, and then you start to add in a wee bit of the experience of what it feels like to get out of your head and experience complete peace of mind, then the whole world can change very, very quickly, just by learning to breathe. And that's like a starter for 10. It's the one thing that every single human being, we need to do it. So, no matter what somebody's trying to sell you in terms of the next, answer, the next big thing, learning to breathe properly. If you're not doing that as a, very, very, that's your starter. Learning how the nervous system works, learning about your stress response, learning how to sleep properly at night time, going to bed and with peace of mind. Without that, then nothing is really going to work. So the answers and the solutions are here. They're out there. They're available to all. We human beings need certain things to make our way through this life. Certain things that are going to make this life experience somewhere close to how it was supposed to be, which is difficult just now, because of the ways of the world and the challenges that we face. But there are absolutely solutions. I've seen it so many different times. I say that I see miracles almost every single day. Learning to switch off stress can be a miracle. Even over the last couple of weeks, I've had people who I have taught to breathe and switch off their stress and gave them peace of mind. And they go home that night. Maybe they've sat in the cold, maybe they've had a wee ice bath before they go, but it does not need to be the ice bath. It can just really be the power of the breath and learning to breathe properly. But they might have a sleep for the first time in the last 20 or 30 years, since they became an adult. So many people are up during the night, just because of chronic stress, because they can't switch their mind off. They can't switch off, the to-do lists in their head. And if you keep that kind of figure eight, the kind of chronic stress figure eight loop going, and some people it never ends. I've never had a break from it. But if you can turn that off and give yourself a break and experience just a wee bit of peace of mind to the point where you actually can think, then that can be a miracle in itself. And then right up to, I would say, full bona fide miracles, people transcending and getting beyond stuff that's happened to them in this lifetime, relating to some of the most horrific things that we as a species can go through. Some of the traumas, physical trauma, some of the sexual traumas, the things that you're not really supposed to get beyond in this lifetime. I've seen it with my own eyes. I've watched people who get out of their head, and then through some guided relaxation, and then eventually meditation. I'm going to be talking a lot about meditation. I'm going to be talking about what meditation is. I'm going to be talking about the benefits of meditation. I'm going to be giving detailed instruction as to how to meditate. Most people don't know what meditation is. Most people believe that meditation is to quiet the mind. Most people believe that meditation is to escape, to find that space of quiet where you're not even thinking, you're just sitting in this Zen realm, which to me that's relaxation. That's very different. Relaxation and meditation are very, very different. Relaxation, the ability to switch off your body, the ability to take control back of your body, the ability to switch off your mind and experience peace of mind. That's relaxation to me, switching off those 80 trillion-ish cells within the body, switching off the 12 different systems within the body, giving yourself a break from you, giving yourself a break from your thoughts and your mind and your intellect. That would be relaxation. Whereas meditation and the purpose and the reason behind meditation is very specifically to reconnect with the divine and to experience the divine. That's what meditation is. Union, coherence, wholeness with the divine, that I do believe that we come from. I believe in God, although God has so many, such a polarising word, so many connotations in terms of God. In the Western world, me growing up as a good Catholic, we had a Catholic Celtic supporting God, and our God absolutely reigned. Our God seemed to be better than all the other gods. And I remember as a kid, how you'd be playing out at night time, playing football up the park or out on the bikes at night time, and the Protestants, Catholic and Protestant, that's the main two religions in Scotland. A wee bit more, obviously, different diversity now in terms of the way the world just now. But back then, back in the day when I was growing up, it was very much Catholic and Protestant in Scotland. Almost linked in ways that you can't even believe, and it makes me laugh even still, would be Celtic and Rangers. I call that the separation game, separating into different houses, separating into different churches, into different football teams, into different belief systems. That's something that's still evident, not probably as bad as it was before in different ways, but that idea of God, sitting on a throne with Celtic strip on, with a big white beard, and then judging you, and either helping you or maybe not, depending on how good you were, how good a Catholic you were. I can remember praying to God every single night, sitting down and doing my rosary, and some of that's good, some of that, certainly the awareness of something other than and greater than yourself. I believe that was a good thing. There's a great Indian saint, it might have been Vivekananda, who talks about how it's really, really great and it's good to be born into organised religion, but it's not so clever to die in it, because religion and spirituality are very, very different, and religion is all about, as far as I can see it, you come in and the church and the ways of that church is going to give you the direct experience of the divine. And one of my teachers on this path, Dr. Wayne Dyer, he used to talk about how spirituality goes beyond that, and it's a realisation of how the divinity is inside, that godness is in every single one of us, and you don't need anybody or anything to connect to it. And that's certainly the purpose of meditation. The purpose of meditation is to, go inside and reconnect with the divinity that we carry inside of us, as above, so below. And the kingdom of God is within you, and to be still and to know it, all that stuff I believe is literal. I absolutely believe that's literal. I believe we carry the divine inside each and every one of us. Call it what you like. The Tao Te Ching talks about how can you name something, how can you name that which cannot be named? Almost too difficult to even express, explain, do justice from this limited human mind and our limited vocabulary. We need to remember that we can only see, hear and feel a really, really tiny amount of this spectrum that we live in, this field of information, consciousness, the electrical systems, what you see, the spectrum of light. We can only take a tiny, way less than 1% what we can actually see. And the same is true what we can hear, so we think as humans that we know everything. And if you can't really explain it and make sense of it in science, then it isn't a thing. So that is obviously, very limiting and hugely challenging for those of us who know of a different way of doing it. And the world is absolutely set up just now. It's set up to be, in one way of doing it. And if you're not doing it that way, then you don't really fit in. So the journey itself for me has been a fascinating one. The intention with it is to help people. I'm coming from my own experience. I'm going to talk about my story. I'm going to tell my story in different bits. It's a fantastic story. It really is. It's really interesting for me going through it in terms of who I am now and what I became and where I started and how I got there and the things that I picked up along my way. I believe are significant in terms of how they help people. There's so many people going through very similar circumstances in their life. And for me, the way that I came across this was the things that I was doing. I remember when I started to talk about depression, I started to talk about my challenges with mental health, but basically on the fly. I'd be talking to people that I was maybe training with, or I was we'd be on the bikes together about a run, and somebody would be feeling a wee bit low, and then you maybe the rest of the pack would disappear, and you'd find yourselves together. And I would find myself talking about my experience with mental health and the things that I was doing, and before they would open up. And what I've always found is that the stuff that I learned and the stuff that when I shared it with others, then things would get better for them. And that's what this is about. That's what this Godcast is all about. It's about giving it to the world and seeing the ones that it attracts, and then the ones that come and the ones that get on about it are, my intention is to help people. Very, very simple. When I got it for myself, the things of this world don't really mean that much to me. When you get through a set of circumstances like I did in the summer of 1996 on the party and the fun, I do believe they call it, the fun island of Ibiza, when you get through a set of the things that I went through, I came out of that experience and everything had changed. So the trappings of this world, the gold and the silver and the money and the toys and the things that used to really interest me and used to absolutely was a big kind of purpose and a big reason for my living, working hard earning the money, making as much money as I could. Greed was absolutely in there. How much can you make? I always believed that the more you made, then the better it got. And that's true up to a certain level. But when I came through my experience, all that was gone. I had no desire for the worldly goods, no desire for worldly things, no desire for money, which was usually challenging, and it still is challenging. Now I have I would say a strong and a healthy desire for the money in this world, and that's purely because of what we'd like to do with it. The intention is to take it and to help as many people as we can. But in terms of things for myself, desiring new stuff, whether it's a better house or a new watch or a holiday would be nice to get a wee bit of sun. But in terms of the trappings and the things that basically lure you towards success, I lost that in the summer of 1996, and that was hugely challenging. It really was, especially raising a young family, and food is expensive, and holidays are expensive, and things like clothes for your weans and all the stuff that it takes to make your way through this world. That's something that's been challenging for me, but that's not the reason for any of this. There's no need. There's not going to be any sponsorship within this. There's not going to be trying to sell anything. The intention is just to help people. That was the juice that I got when I come back. Once I really kind of got into this work and started to find my own way, then it became helping people and passing on the information that I'd learned. Was what it was all about, and it's been an amazing journey. It's been an incredible journey. It's a journey I'm absolutely blessed with. I still find it difficult to believe that I find myself sitting here talking about the things that I talk about, particularly relating back and remembering back to the guy that I was before that, the experience, the life-changing experience. But here's where we are. What can you do? It's been a fascinating journey, and I am absolutely blessed. But as I said, very important to understand the evidence of what you came in as, like how you got to this point, what's your experiences, so you're absolutely qualified to teach. And in terms of mental health, physical well-being, and particularly in the spiritual realms, that's the areas where I am teaching. That's the areas where I find myself teaching just now. It's all about an intentional life. It's all about taking back your power. It's all about taking back control. So many people are going through this lifetime just now in lack and separation. So many people are broken. So many people are lost. So many people are decimated by this environment that we find ourselves in. And that's very challenging for someone who can see the answers and can see the solutions. So the intention is to offer answers and to offer solutions, and then, as always, and particularly with this work, you can't give them to anybody. The amount of people that I see and they come and they go through, whether it's a one-on-one or whether it's one of the kind of workshops or whatever it is, and they reconnect and they remember. I always say that there's nothing really to learn. It's all about remembering the power that's inside of us, remembering the power that you are and is inside you, every single one of us. And I can see them, and a lot of the times I verbalise it in terms of, I know who needs this and I'm going to get them here, I'm going to bring them back. And what I would say is to get it for yourself. What I would say is to be selfish with it, and really, very difficult to give this to anybody in my experience. And the ones that do try to give it and pass it on, that's very much appreciated. But I would absolutely, focus on yourself. I would focus on, getting it for yourself. It's a vast system. There is so much in it. The intentional life and everything that goes in it. A lot of my students will ask me, like, what is it that you do? And I remember Tony Robbins in 1998 was the first time I saw him. And he basically said the exact same thing. Somebody had asked him what it is that he does, and his response was amazing. He basically said that, like, do you really want to know? Or are you just asking? And at the time, I kind of didn't really get that. Now I understand what that means in terms of the practices and the disciplines and this way of living, which has been at different levels, at different stages of the game. This lifetime for me is ebbing and flowing. I'm a human being going through a healing journey. And along that healing journey, I have learned some really cool stuff that when I pass them on to people, it doesn't seem, it literally and absolutely makes things better. So at this point, at this stage of the game, 52 years old, my plan is to take it to the world, help as many people as we can, and offer a solution for those who are looking for answers, those who are maybe going through life and are lost and have lost their way, and maybe lost their hope in the world, maybe lost their faith in this place we're living in just now. And it's to give that back and to empower as many people as we can, because that's the way I believe we get it back to the way it's meant to be. The way of the world doesn't work. the way we're going through this time-space reality just now isn't working. That's obvious. The way the system's set up, in terms of the debt and the finances and the banking system and the food that we eat, the medications that people are taking, 10 a penny, the environment in terms of the stresses we're in, the food that goes into the body, the detrimental effects of the food, and how so many people are in dis-ease, so many people are sick, so many people are dying way too young for many different reasons. I believe it's meant to be better than that, and this work is absolutely about offering solutions to get it back to the way that it's meant to be. All glory to God. You'll hear me say very often, this work has been coming through me in many different ways. The path that I'm now on is one that I never expected, but the way that I've learned it and the way that it just came together, and the way that it continues to show up in new ways almost every single day. I know that it's not me. I know that it's getting run about me, and my intention is to pay it forward and to help people. But I do believe there are divine forces, especially just now when we need them. I believe divine forces are at play, and I believe they're trying to help us. And we, as a species, if we can get back to the way it's meant to be, which is in alignment with that, in alignment with the divine, in alignment with the planet, in alignment with Mother Nature, in alignment with ourselves. We really don't know who we are. We've forgotten who we are as a species. One of the questions that I ask people almost right off the bat is like, do you know who you are? And most people have no idea who they are. Most people think that their belief system, or their bank account, or their job, or their role as a parent, or the stuff and the things that we do in this lifetime. But that's just the stuff we do, and that's not really who we are. So rediscovering the power that's within us, rediscovering who we really are, and that purpose, that's really what it's all about. The intentional life. So my story, and the way that it began, is really important. It's important to see, to see if it's for you. I started in just normal, humble beginnings. Actually, yesterday I took my wife. We're out driving about one of the local towns where one of the first homes I lived in, probably between the ages of 2 and 4, and it was just a small. Probably the next stage up. We started in a council house, and then my dad bought his first kind of private house. I think it cost him 300 quid. That would be the early 70s. I was born in 1971, so 1972, 1973. A kind of small 2-bedroom kind of private house. Dad started his own business around about that time, and the intention to better himself, to better the family, and to give us the stuff that he never had. That was the plan behind it. It was interesting watching it yesterday, how it takes you back, and the memories that I still had, from being there, playing football out in the street with my pals. Some of the stories my mum used to tell. My mum passed away over 4 years ago now. COVID actually was that took out my mum after a whole series of different things that she went through. I'm going to be talking a lot about my mum, I would imagine, on here. An incredible being, a literal saint, and someone who I absolutely still have a connection with. Death I'm going to be talking about, so what I learned when she passed away and went through her death experience, and the things that I picked up during that time, and how even still to this day, the relationship that I've got with her. And I was thinking about her yesterday, how the stories that she would tell, and certain things that happened when I was tiny. And back then I would be 2 or 3 years old. And the things that happened, I can remember them. Whether that's because of she would tell the stories, or whether it's because, but yesterday driving past that house, I can remember some of the stuff. I can remember doing certain things when I was 2 or 3 years old. And I talk a lot about how the unconscious mind, how it stores every single thing there has ever been. And that certainly felt true to me yesterday, driving through the wee kind of streets and thinking about where I played football and my first girlfriend, when I was 2 or 3 years old, which is madness. The life of where it began, in those really kind of normal working class. Mum stays at home, Dad goes to work, let's see how much money we can make, and then how they kicked on from that. Very quickly we moved. I was 4 years old. We moved 2 or 3 weeks before I moved to my first primary school, and that's really where the wheels started to come off for me. There were certain things happened probably before that I will possibly share further down the road. But certainly the first time I remember any kind of hardship, certainly looking back over years and years of contemplation after it, in that place, in that kind of small kind of private scheme, down in a town called Wishaw, Coltness it was. that's a time when I remember being blissfully happy. I remember being like joyful. I remember probably the way life is meant to be. I take people through a series of basically through the breath work, and we reconnect back into joy. And my wife would always say, like, what is it when you take somebody to remember what it feels like to be joyful? And I'll ask people that, well, when's the last time you experienced joy? Normally when they're in deep, kind of relaxation, then they're normally in meditation. You know, when's the last time, when you're really in your unconscious mind, when's the last time you felt joy? And for me, you know, my wife would say, why do people always go to tears? And it's because joy is missing. You know, joy is something that should really be like a birthright for human beings. This planet that we live on, this world, this earth, it's literal. It should be a literal paradise. It should be, and it isn't, you know, and it should be joyful, and we should be happy because of the environment we're in, but so few are. And she used to say to me, why is it, what happens with joy, what happens with the tears at joy? And I took myself through the process the next day. She asked me that a couple of years ago, and I went through the process of going through some breath work and then going inside and then remembering the last time that I'd felt joy in my life. And it took me right back to that time, you know, where I was out playing with my pals, my wee Celtic strip on, I had a dummy in my top pocket. A wee pacifier, a wee dummy tit, and that was the last time I could really remember being like truly joyful, and it broke my heart. I couldn't stop crying because, you know, from the age of 2-3 years old up until that stage, I was probably 48, 49. There certainly hadn't been enough joy. There had been kind of bits of joy, but not enough joy, and that was the last time when I remember being probably the way it was meant to be, like boundless, endless, you know, just pure joy, you know, the way that it's supposed to be as a human being. And then at 4 or 5 years old, we moved house. My dad got an opportunity his business is obviously doing well. He was a glazier, my dad. He made the first ever PVC plastic windows, certainly one of the first in the country. And his business started to expand, and the finances that came with it, you know, very, very quickly. So we moved up to a local town called Carluke, which was probably 6 or 7 miles away. We built an incredible house, like a 4-storey house, and some of the stories of that, how that came together. This is back in the Wild West, probably like kind of Goodfellas, you know, where before computers, before there was, you know, real traceability, the security systems, and my dad they grew up with nothing, you know, so the people he was working with, he talks about how he built that house, and the amount of things that they basically just took on building sites. This was right at the boom of the building trade, you know, they'd be going onto building sites, him as a glazier, you know, they'd be building hundreds of houses, so, you know, taking what they needed seemed to be the norm. I've spoke to a few of his pals, and that was a way back then. They just seemed to just kind of take whatever they needed for themselves, and that, you can understand that, you know, obviously that's not the right way to do things. But you can understand that, you know, people growing up with nothing, and basically every single thing that they had to, you know, that they achieved in their life came through hard work and fighting, you know, and a lot of time taken as well, because nobody was going to give it to you. And we moved into that house a couple of weeks before I started primary school, and I can remember getting into primary school, moved to a brand new house, didn't know anybody, middle of nowhere, you know, hated it, hated the school. I can remember going in and just kicking lumps out of my teacher. God bless her soul, and I know this woman. I'm pretty sure she's still alive, and I can remember like getting dragged into school, yeah, which was obviously, I wasn't in the best of places. I wasn't that happy at the time, and the entire school system was like that for me. I used to go to school to basically play football. Football was the only thing I was ever really good at. Football, I believe, is the only thing I've ever excelled at. It's what I thought for a long period of my life I was put on this earth to do, was to play football. And certainly from the age that I could walk, my dad, and this is before the internet, this is before really television, so you had to really like occupy yourself with doing stuff you enjoyed, and it was always football for me. It was football 24/7, and you know, whether it's nurture or nature, I was pretty good at it. And you know, by the time I got into primary school, the ball was with me at all times. I used to take the ball to school every single day. I lived for playtimes. That morning playtime and then the afternoon playtime would be a game of football, and all the other stuff in between in terms of the schoolwork. It didn't make any sense to me. It didn't matter to me. Did I struggle to take it in, the information? Possibly and probably. But again, if your brain does not see a reason for learning anything, then it's not going to, you know, you're not going to take it in. I learned that from Tony Robbins in 1998, where he spoke about how the brain learns. And I remember thinking back about my school, my education, my school career, and how so much of it just did not go in. I had no reason for learning it. And that was primarily because of football. You know, by the time I got to, you know, primary 6, primary 7, I was probably known as a really good footballer. That's the one thing that I could do. I could score goals for fun. Hundreds of them. I was a goal scorer, you know, so no matter where the ball would land, I used to kind of find myself, it would find its way to me. And I would normally always score, whether it was the playground or whether it was, you know, the organised games. By the time you start to get up to primary 6, primary 7, just before you go to high school, then there's organised teams. And I would be up front, centre forward, scoring goals almost every game. And by the time I went to high school, actually, my wife, who lived in the town that I stay in just now, Lanark, she knew me as Jim McFadyen, the footballer, which is absolutely crazy. You know, it's fascinating to think. And you've been in the local papers, you know, scoring goals and winning cups and pictures and all that kind of thing. And by the time I got to, you know, high school, there was started the talk of interest of professional teams, and the desire was absolutely to become a professional footballer. That's the only thing that interested me. It would be every single day, 7 days a week, me out the back with a football, you know, keeping the ball up, you know, taking penalties, taking free kicks, imaginary goalkeepers when nobody else was there. My brother was very, very different. He was a scholar. He went down the education route. I never ever played as a kid. Never played with toys, and I used to struggle with that as well when my kids were born. You know, my brother grew up with Star Wars and reading books, and very, very different from me. I just never did that kind of stuff. It was always a football strip, a pair of football boots, and that was me. That was my life. And that's the thing I was believe I was meant to do. And by the time I got to high school, there was certainly, you know, interest starting to come from senior teams, senior professional teams, and by the time I was probably 12, 13, certainly when I went to high school, that was my only and absolute goal, was to become a professional footballer, to become famous, to become rich, to become wealthy, to become the man, you know, like a superstar, I suppose, you know, be the man. I think I had the ability to do that. I had boundless energy. It never ended for me. I was always on the go. I was always happy. I was always probably joyful, certainly because most of the stuff I was doing I enjoyed in terms of the football. And into high school, I remember going to the first year, the trials, and people kind of knew who I was, you know, because of my abilities to play football. Certainly attracted interest from the females of the species, which again I was always the primary school that we grew up in. It was probably a wee bit backward and probably quite slow compared to a lot of the local towns. So things like girlfriends, you would have a girlfriend in primary 7, but you would go with her. There was never any kissing or cuddling or that kind of stuff. It was, you had a kind of this almost like a silent partnership. You'd be going with somebody, which was brilliant and beautiful and innocent. Really good stuff. And it wasn't until I went to high school that all changed. And certainly the Wains for different parts of Scotland. Obviously some of them were a bit rougher as well, and I had different experiences from me. But, you know, getting interest from females at a young age, that was something that I was very uncomfortable with. And yeah, as I say, the goal was always football. It was simply to play football. And that basically, up until probably first year, when we went into first year, there was a set of strikes. So the first year was great, like playing every Saturday with the school football team. Sunday was a local football team. Up here in Lanark was Kirkfield United, which was like almost like a mini select. They seemed to take the best players from different towns within probably, I don't know, 10, 15 mile radius. You know, I was the only person, I believe, from Carluke they came up, which was 7 miles away, and all the local towns. You know, it wasn't just like people from Lanark, kids from Lanark. It was people from different areas. That was Sunday, football on a Sunday, the school team on a Saturday, and then, you know, we used to play on a Sunday. And really fortunate. Kirkfield is still going, but back then it was like almost like a semi-professional outfit compared to most of the teams we play against. We used to rock up on a Sunday and we'd have like these, like the full woolen jerseys with the collar and the tie, with our own bags. There was a level of professionalism that wasn't really there in organised kind of kids football at that time. A lot of times you'd beaten the teams before you even started, and the fact it was a select team was great as well. You know, because we had a really fantastic team. We used to play up at Lanark Barracks, which is no longer there. They did away with it years and years ago to put houses on it, but the football pitches were kind of really sheltered, really kind of famous football pitches up this way, really sheltered with trees, and they had the most incredible playing surface, perfect playing surface. Up in Lanark there's a really kind of rich, kind of silty soil, That's Lanark Golf Course, which is just over the back for here, is built on a similar soil. And the barracks where we played is basically walking distance from the golf course. So it was a similar kind of, the pitches were just incredible. It was a great environment. That added to the fact we had a really good team. And it was organised well in terms of the training and the people that run about it, and it was a great time. 12, 13 into high school. Second year of high school, there was a strike. It was a EIS, it was called at the time. The teachers went on strike, and the football stopped on a Saturday, so that was cancelled. That started in first year, and it didn't come back in again until I think I was in fifth year. So it was probably 3 or 4 years where there was the teachers weren't getting paid. Basically for putting the training and organising the games on a Saturday, so that stopped, and it was really just the focus was on Kirkfield, and it was great. I was rattling in goals every single week. There was starting to be interest from senior teams at the time. Motherwell was my local team. Celtic was my boyhood team because of the house I was born into. And that was my dream, was to play for Celtic. Celtic Manchester United, that was my dream. And I believed I was good enough. I always felt I was good enough. The ability to score goals is obviously, it's such a valuable commodity. And I could always score goals. I always scored goals. I took the penalties. I was a captain. Free kicks. I was probably a decent size, for my age. So I was great in the air. So I could score headers, the amount of corners that would come in. And in some games, I would score 2, 3, 4 goals. The most I ever scored in one game was 9, I do believe. That was a game down at Kirklook. I scored 9 goals. And it should have been a lot more. I started to get a wee bit stale during it, where I was missing chances that I would never normally miss. It could have been a lot more, but I think it was 9 in an organised game was the most I ever scored. And obviously that attracts interest, from the senior teams. Motherwell was the local team. They had a boys club called Fir Park Boys Club at the time, and Kirkfield had an incredible team. We really did. We would win the league most years. We would beat all the local teams. And by the time I got to into second year, certainly, then you're only looking at, by the time you get to 16 years old, at the time you could sign professionally, you could get into a thing called, it was the ground staff. So the guys that were in at Celtic, they would be on like 50 quid a week, and they would go in, they'd be assigned a pro to clean the boots, and they would work in the stadium in terms of keeping it tidy and keeping the dressing rooms tidy. And that was my goal, to become, a full-time, by the time I got to 16 years old, full-time professional player, and then progress, up to being a superstar. That was a plan. That was not only plan. Anything else didn't matter. Even girls and none of that mattered. It was all to do with football. It's all I did 24/7. And up until second year, I think it happened in second year, where everything changed for me, and it was a turning point. It was one of the turning points in my life. There's been a few turning points in my life, and that was one of the first turning points. And really, simply and honestly, what happened to me that changed the shape of my life was I was given a vaccine, and I believe it was second year at high school. It might have been the BCG. I've still got the mark on my arm, but I believe it was a BCG vaccine I received at the time. And nothing, it was just, I can remember my mum coming in, God bless her, she came in to basically to look after me. She came into the school. I can remember her walking on the corridor to basically come in. I was sitting outside the kind of nurse's office, and she came in, and it was done and dusted in a couple of minutes. You went in, you basically get the shot in your arm, and that was it. Away you went. Never thought anything of it. Everybody was getting it, and that was just the way that it was. You got the vaccines, and you basically went about it. You had to get them, I believe. I don't think it was a choice at the time. Or certainly, the awareness as to you didn't have to get it. That was never a thing for me. You did what everybody else did, and you got it. And a short period of time later, it was within probably weeks, maybe even a month, I can remember becoming sick. Now this is stuff that I didn't learn and really have the full understanding and realisation of for many, many years. I didn't realise what had happened to me back then, and I didn't realise it was a cause of so many things that basically went wrong in my life. But looking back right at that time, I was out playing golf. Again, any sport I was into, golf was absolutely part of it. At a time, they thought I went professional at either football or golf when I was young. I could hit the ball for miles. Again, that hand-eye coordination, just being really sporty. I was out playing golf one night in the rain, and I got a kind of chest infection, which leading up to that, I used to get no well. My mum smoked right through my pregnancy. We grew up in a time where smoking was encouraged. I can remember sitting in the aeroplanes, and we would always be in the smoking section, and there would be a wee kind of curtain with the chair in front of you, and we'd be in the smoking section, where as soon as you took off, people would be lighting up, and there'd just be this just plume of smoke you'd be breathing in. And any time we're in the car, my mum and dad would a lot of the times we smoking. One of the rooms my dad had in the house was a bar. Actually, the sign that's going to be going up here, it's getting worked on just now, is over 50 years old, and it was my dad's first bar that he had in his home that he built in the early 70s. He saw this design in America when he was over in America, and he brought it back, and he built this bar. And I've got the bit of wood, I've got the countertop for this. I've been carrying it about for the last 30 years, and it's going to be the sign for the Darkness to Light podcast, which is brilliant. A wee bit of that time with me. But I lost my train of thought there. The time where it was playing golf and basically became no well and had this kind of chest infection, that very quickly developed, into, I was talking about smoking, I was talking about being in like passive smoking and basically at different stages of my life. That's where I was talking about how I would get sick, normally get sick maybe once a year. I was prone to probably chest infections. I was prone to, I was getting antibiotics, I would say probably once a year. I'd end up in bed. It was quite interesting. Every single year at Christmas time there was a football tournament, an indoor kind of 7-a-side football tournament, and I played it once, but I remember for 2 or 3 years after it, from kind of 9, 10, 11, 12, where I missed it every single year. And at the same time every year, I would have like this chest infection, like coughing up phlegm, and I'd been antibiotics for a week. I'd been in bed for probably 4 or 5 days. So before the vaccination, I wasn't like in terms of jumping out my skin, like fully vital, and I had loads of energy. I was always happy. I was always kind of bouncing about and looking for stuff to do, like any kind of normal kid, I suppose. But once I received the vaccine and I became sick, I ended up in bed, ended up with double pneumonia, I was too sick to move to hospital. And I was in bed for it felt like a good 3, 4, 5 weeks. I was off school for a couple of months. I remember growing. I remember coming out of bed and just being a different human being, just skin and bone. I'd probably grown. It felt like about 6 inches. It probably wasn't, but I felt like I had just this massive stretch. And I remember when I came back from that and I went back to school, that things had changed. I think things were very, very different. Especially with the respiratory, especially with breathing, when I'm back to kind of playing football. Previously, with the chest infections and that kind of stuff on the antibiotics, you would go back and then within a couple of weeks, you would be almost back to normal. You would feel your strength back, you would get your chi back, your energy back, you would go again. But after that bout of pneumonia and being in bed, things were very, very different. Things didn't feel the same. I was more and more... I'd be breathless a lot of the time. I was starting to get cramps a lot. I remember going to like a football tournament and you would play maybe 5 or 6 like mini games in a day, might have been half the time. And I can remember coming home at night time and like on more than one occasion I'd have cramp for the neck down. My entire body would be seized up in cramp, which I'd never experienced before. And obviously just thought it was maybe growing and maybe exhaustion and whatever it was. Never put down to what had happened with the vaccination. That didn't come for a long, long time later. But I remember things were different. Things were absolutely different. And right at a really kind of crucial time, 13, 14, getting into 15, my health wasn't great in terms of football. Still had the ability, was still rattling in goals, but in terms of the spark and the life force on the football pitch and just that boundless energy that I had before, that certainly wasn't there for whatever reason. And we never ever put it down to anything that had happened like that in the past. Always just felt maybe that I was growing. That was always the thing that was put down. You're just growing, you're developing. And my mum and dad were very proactive in terms of helping any way they could towards this dream of becoming a professional footballer. But by the time I was 14, 15, I was still really, really good. I had been offered to sign with the local club Motherwell. It was the step before becoming an apprentice. I was too young. I was obviously still at school. This would be 4th year, so I'd be 14, 15. Motherwell would try to sign me. And I remember at the time I laughed because I had much grander ambitions. My plan was either Celtic or Manchester United. I'd been in trial with Celtic and I'd went and played with Celtic at a local tournament. I think I scored a couple of goals. I actually stole a pair of the shorts. Celtic used to have the numbers on the shorts and I stole the wee number 7. Davy Provan was my hero growing up. Kenny Dalglish was my absolute hero. When Kenny moved to Liverpool, it broke my heart. I remember 1977, 78, I'd have been 7 or 8. I remember King Kenny moved to Liverpool and it just broke me. I couldn't handle it. I couldn't believe he'd left Celtic. So I remember going on trial with Celtic, scored a few goals, was offered to go back and play with them. And there was like internationalists standing on the sideline. There was guys that had been playing for Scottish schoolboys and couldn't get a game. There was probably 30 people standing at the sides waiting to get a game, and all these trialists would come in, because they obviously the pick. Celtic and Rangers in Scotland had the choice of, obviously the best talent. And my dad, the old head and young shoulders for me was always a thing. My dad would say, like, if you're good enough, later on they'll come, so kind of keep away from them. And make your name somewhere else, and then if the time comes later on, then fantastic. If it doesn't, then it wasn't meant to be. We were always a great believer in that. If it's for you, it'll not go by you. That was one of my mum's great sayings. If it's for you, it won't get past you. So take your time, and it'll work out for you. And from being offered to sign with Motherwell, laughing at Tommy McLean at the time. I remember like literally laughing in his face, like a giggle. I couldn't help it, and he didn't like it. That was 14, 15 years old, and then really kind of soon after that, I started to attract interest from certain, it was first division clubs in England. Nottingham Forest was the first one. A man called Bobby Jenks, who was latterly the Motherwell. He was at Motherwell for years and years and years. He had been watching my games, and I got a letter. I've actually still got the letter from Nottingham Forest that offered me to go down and trial. And at the time, they were a big deal. They'd won the European Cup twice, 1977, 78, round about there. They won it back to back. The old European Cup, which was very different from what it is now. At the time, the European Cup was the ones that had won the league. From the country, that's the ones that went into the European. I don't think it was even the top two. I think it was just the ones that had won it. So the European Cup was a huge deal. It was a massive deal, and they'd won it twice. And Brian Clough, who was just a legend, a living legend at the time. The thought he going down there and going in trial with Notts Forest was incredible. That was really exciting, and then it was really starting to get, I suppose, the evidence, of. I am good enough to do this. This is what's going to happen. Let's see what we need to do to make this happen. So interest from Nottingham Forest, and then Chelsea came on side. They came round about, and they started to note their interest. I went down to Chelsea 2 or 3 times. I was too young to sign for them. One of their, I think it was their chief scout, came up and watched me at a game up in the north of Scotland. I think I scored 4 or 5 goals, and he gave me the ball at the end of it, and he actually said to the guy, the Scottish scout at the time, that he'd never ever seen anybody who could score goals the way that I used to score goals, which was a magic compliment. At the time, they had a man called Kerry Dixon, who I met a couple of times when I was down at Chelsea, who was a Golden Boot winner. So me at kind of 14, 15, and this scout saying he'd never seen anybody, the ball used to find me. And you talk about awareness and being in the right place at the right time. It was no matter where I was, I always used to believe. And I remember that time when he asked me what position did I play, and honestly, the answer was I'm a goal scorer. It doesn't matter where I play, whether it was centre midfield or up front or coming in off the side in the wing. I always used to score goals, so I was a goal scorer, and that was obviously very, very valuable to them. So I went down to Chelsea 2 or 3 times. Had some great stories going down to Chelsea. Went down at the time. Craig Burley, I stayed with Craig Burley. Craig signed with Chelsea and got a chunk of cash, I think, at the time. I was too young to sign for them, and to be honest, at that time, would I have signed with Chelsea? Would I have went to London? I probably would have. A wee bit after my first trip to Chelsea, then there was interest from Manchester United and Alex Ferguson. This is before he was Sir Alex Ferguson. He'd watched me in a Scottish trial up in the north of Scotland, and had kind of penciled me in for some time down at Old Trafford, which was a dream. And it was Celtic and United. That was the 2 teams. If you were a Celtic fan, then Man United, which is still the case for a lot of them, would be your second team. And when the letter came in for Man United, a game which I've still got, 1986, I got that, so I was 15, offered to go down to the kind of, I can't remember what they called it. It was British trials. It seemed like there was probably 70 or 80 boys there for all over the UK. I think there was some international as well. There might have been some Scandinavian boys there possibly. But I went down to Manchester for, I think it was 5 days trial, get the train done. Met an old guy called Bill Dickey, who was a Man United chief scout in Scotland. Bill was probably in his 70s or his 80s, and I really all used to come and stand at the side. Used to see him at the side, and by this time I knew who he was, and he would watch you, and I was rattling goals on every single week. So off to Man United I went down in the train. I had a fantastic trial. I've got the notes of the trial, which is brilliant. Looking back at the individual days of the trial, and I was so serious about it. Even at 15. Went down there, actually fell out with my girlfriend before I went because I didn't want any distractions, and went to the trials, had a fantastic trial. By the end of it, sitting in the one of the big conference kind of suites, and then they came out at the end of it and they basically said, look, obviously we can't sign all of these, but we'll keep an eye on you, and we'll basically let you down to say, look, it's not going to be here for you, but keep your chin up, keep going. It's a big world out there, don't give up your dreams, that kind of stuff. And I remember, thinking at the time, I just felt good. I felt as if everything was going to be fine, even though they'd given us this kind of let you down kind of speech. And they called my name right at the beginning. There was only 2 or 3 of us got called to go and sit with Mr. Ferguson. And I went and sat in the executive suite with Alex Ferguson as a 15-year-old. Dead serious, like a wee mini pro. I had my blazer and my collar and tie on that I'd taken down with me for the final night's dinner. I don't believe anybody else did in the whole place. I'd be sitting with a blazer on, probably looking like an absolute a tool compared to the rest of them sitting in their trackies. But I went in and I spent probably 15-20 minutes with Alex Ferguson. And the chat was, what he said was, like, we'd like to get you back down. Obviously, they've got a lot of stuff going for you. What's your thoughts about moving away from home? What do you think about coming here? And the only thing I was hearing was would you like to sign for Manchester United? That was it. And I knew I was going to sign and then play for Manchester. I was going to start for Manchester United, even if Fergie didn't know it. And I came out of there, this was before mobile phones, and I phoned my dad for one of the wee corridors, and just tears, tears of, we've made it, this is it, this is happened. My dad was on the other side of the phone, breaking his heart, just greeting. And then left there, and went back up the road, and that was it. I was signing for Manchester United, and by the time I got back up the road, my dad had obviously shared the word, and everybody knew about it, so that was it. It was as if I'd made it already. I see that a lot with young kids that play football. They think they've made it, actually nothing's really happened. Great opportunity, but nothing really happened. And then just after that, I went back down to Chelsea, and I don't know why I went back to Chelsea. At the time, Chelsea had been giving me like football strips, hundreds of them, to sell. I think they were bribing me. So I would go up to Ingleston Market with the Chiefs Chelsea scout, Mr. Skinner, his name was, Dave Skinner. Big heavy guy, lovely big guy. Took me down to Chelsea 2 or 3 times. And they went up to Ingleston Market and we'd sell maybe £1,000 worth of Fitbit strips, the old Chelsea collection it was called. And I would get the money, they would just give me the money. And I think they were trying to bribe me. So I went back down to Chelsea, and I still wasn't great at the time. I still wasn't healthy. I still wasn't keeping great in terms of my physical health. I was still breaking down in terms of viruses and chest infections and being out of breath. But the ability and scoring goals, it seemed to be enough at the time. I seemed to be getting away with it. And when I went back down to Chelsea, I was there for a week, and I think we had it was like the second game that I played, and I basically broke down with a groin injury. I hurt my groin, strained my groin, came off, injured early into the second half, and a groin strain. Went and saw the physio the next day, who at the time was a man called Norman Medhurst, who was at England physio. And I was basically told, a couple of weeks, you'll be fine, you just rest, ice, stretch, physio when you get back up the road. And Chelsea obviously knew my interest from Manchester United at this time, and they were starting to, what's your plans, what you going to do, is there any point of us because of Manchester's interest, or what are you going to do? I went back up the road and I thought it was going to be a couple of weeks, and unfortunately for me, I never kicked a ball for about 18 months. I never played again for about 18 months. And I remember when I hurt my groin at Chelsea, my first thought was Manchester United. Like, oh my God, what about United? What about Fergie? What about going back down again? And it never happened. I never ever made it back down again. I believe Alex Ferguson, he spoke to my brother. He phoned the house one day, my brother picked it up just to ask how I was getting on. And that 18-month period, number one, I missed my window of opportunity in terms of my apprenticeship, the time you're supposed to go in and be round about the pros and go through that whole kind of the steps to the process of becoming a pro. I missed that, and it wasn't until 18 months later, when I was a lot bigger, I'd been probably eating too much. I obviously wasn't training. My mental health for the first time probably took a wee bit of a dunt, a wee bit of a dink, where I was starting to experience uncertainty. I was probably starting to be a wee bit fearful in terms of, all right, okay, how is this going to work out? How is this going to play out? And the answer was that it didn't. I came back 18 months later, overweight, very fearful, probably, not just disappointed, but almost broken by the fact that I'd missed my chance to go to Manchester. And right when I came back, the same scout that was down at Nottingham Forest at the time, Mr. Jenks, Bobby Jenks, he was now with Motherwell. And he came in and he actually offered to sign me without me even kicking a ball. I hadn't kicked a ball in competition, but he offered to sign me for Motherwell. And I decided to take it. I signed for Motherwell at the age of, by that time I would be probably 16 and a half, getting into probably 17. So right at the end of kind of youth football, before you either need to go like full time, for me anyway, full time or professional, that would be the stepping stone. And I came back and I signed with Motherwell, and it was up and down, ebbing and flowing would be the best way to put it. It wasn't easy. I was struggling with not just the injury, I was also struggling with my physical health. I'd be on the pitch, and I went full time with Motherwell instantly. They never paid me. It was really interesting, how I was working with my dad. I would come right back. I'd left school, started working with my dad. I was working in the office. My dad had a fairly decent sized business at the time, so I was working in the office doing different things, really just to give me a wee bit of money. And then football in the morning time was a priority. I'd go to train in the morning time, and then in the afternoon I would back up to the office. I would do my stuff, and then at night time would be physio and then basically recovering for the next day. That's how it went for me at that time. And I spent 2 years at Motherwell. I signed for Motherwell. Tom McLean and Tam Forsyth, that was a management team, and underneath them was obviously the guy that signed me, Bobby Jenks. He was more to do with youth development, but the day-to-day stuff, the training, the day-to-day stuff, Monday to Friday, then the games at the weekend, which was full time. It was 2-3 hours a day every single day, and it was a really interesting time. It was a fascinating time, a very frustrating time. I was still rattling in the goals. I think the first year back I scored, I think it was 78 goals. It was just under. I think it was 78 or 79 goals that I scored. We were unbeaten. We had a fantastic team. Again, it was Motherwell Boys Club a couple of years previously. I played right at the end. The conception of Motherwell Boys Club. Motherwell basically had a select team where they took their original Boys Club for part, and then they took in players from, it was Notts Forest Boys Club over in Coatbridge, and then obviously Kirkfield up in Lanark as well was the other kind of best team in the area, and they basically took the pick of all the three teams, and then they created Motherwell Boys Club, which was absolutely affiliated with Motherwell. The Motherwell strips and the management team would start taking interest in it. And we were unbeaten for the first year. I don't believe we got beat that first year. We beat Celtic at Hampden in the Scottish Cup final, which was fantastic. I made 2 goals, played all right, never kept that great, wasn't feeling that good that whole season. Cramps, viruses. At certain times, especially when you went on, there was a thing at the time, was it the Scottish Cup run we went on? It was one of the big competitions, and after 5 minutes I would be exhausted. I would be like cramping up, and we Tam McLean was just there was no sympathy, put it that way. This was very much old school, fire and brimstone. I remember after the Scottish Cup final, he literally had me by the throat in the changing rooms, basically telling me we'd just beaten Celtic 4-0 at Hampden. Or 4-1. I'd made 2 goals, played centre midfield. I thought I did really well. Wasn't that healthy, but I thought I did pretty good. And he had me with the throat, basically shouting and bawling at me, and brought me to tears. I remember leaving Hampden Park as a Scottish Cup finalist winner, beating Celtic, and been in the car, and my dad just gone, well, I want to kill him. My dad was the Bear, was my dad's name growing up. That was his nickname, the Bear, just wild, and it was like, where is he? Let's get him. And then they brought us back in the next morning, and basically, I think they ran us. I think they brought us in and put us through running. They were obviously trying to keep us grounded, but there was no celebration. There was no. I remember him saying to me the only reason I was on the pitch was because of my height at the end of it in front of everybody. So really, levels beyond like bringing you back down to earth, and that was my story at Motherwell. It wasn't a really happy time for me, and it probably should have been. I was never healthy. I was always not well. I was always picking up groin strains. They were treating my groin for about 18 months. I was getting all sorts of treatments on my groin injury. I'd been down to Lillis Hall, which was a national rehabilitation centre at the time. I'd been to a specialist in America whilst we were on holiday, seeing different surgeons, and it was always just this recurring groin strain. I remember when the specialist said it might be like a chronic strain, and it might be just that's the way it is, and you might not be able to play, which was the first time I really cried properly hard, I think, in my life. The thought of not playing football was almost too much to bear. And second year at Motherwell was much the same. I should have known when I went back. When I went back to Motherwell for the second year, and I think this has a lot to do with a couple of things. When I laughed at wee Tam, when he tried to sign me, I don't think he liked that. I think he carried it with him, and he never really, he wouldn't even acknowledge me. And some of the times you would go in, I would be there to train, but they weren't paying me, I was doing it for nothing. And they would basically say, you're not training today, just get home. or you can hang about here and gaze a hand when we come back. And the first team would go with the apprentices and I'd be left behind, and I'd just go up and go to work. And you think about speaking your truth now and standing up for yourself. That wasn't me. I was always quiet and probably gentle, I suppose, and definitely balanced in terms of the masculine and the feminine. The whole speaking your truth and standing up for yourself, that wasn't me back then. And I would just go back and go to work. And when I came back for my second year, I should have known, because every single one of the apprentices right up to the pros, was probably 40 or 50 on the books at the time. Every single one of them, they had their own brand new training kit, a new sponsor, new kit, new stuff. And I was basically told the first day that I come back, I had to wear the previous year's training kit. Which, when you look back now and you think, oh man, Jim, what were you doing, man? Fucking stand up for yourself, grow up here almost. But I didn't. I just got on with it, because I think at the time I was never ever going to. I always thought of myself as being better than Motherwell. I always thought I would move on and kick on from that. So it was like a stepping stone. And the fact they weren't paying me, they probably knew as well that I kind of had, whether it was delusions of grandeur or I felt myself to be better than them, I don't know. Still scoring goals, a great environment. I mean, the amount of players, the amount of top quality players, a lot of a lot of pros at the end of their career were coming in because of Wee Tam and Big Tam, their obviously connection with Glasgow Rangers. There was so many ex-Rangers players. Bobby Russell was an incredible footballer. There was, who was there? Dave McPherson was there at the time. I'm trying to think what other, and then Davy Cooper signed. Davy Cooper, who was one of the best in the world, Coop, he signed, I remember the day that he came in, and he signed with Motherwell. So you're going to training with these kind of players. Northern Ireland internationalist Colin O'Neill was there. There was some great football players, really. It should have been a fantastic time for me, and it wasn't. It really wasn't. I didn't enjoy it, and mostly because I wasn't well. I wasn't fit a lot at the time. The runs that we used to do, the pre-season training was a nightmare for me. The days we would go running, I just couldn't do it. It wasn't a case I didn't want to do it. I just couldn't do it. There was something physically holding me back. That at the time, there was nothing, no explanation, or there was never any sympathy or let's try and help you. It was just like they saw me as being lazy, I do believe, and probably spoiled. And Tam used to say, "You're a luxury player. You're a luxury player," just because I could score goals. But there was no, at the time, Motherwell were probably lower to mid-division. It was all about fighting and, like that. Like, at the time, it was kick and chase. As a centre forward, they'd batter the balls into the corner, you'd have to chase. It was completely the opposite of what I did. I remember one of the scouts saying later on, that if I'd been born in a different country with the ball, I was a ball player, so skillful, the ball at your feet, even as a young kid, keeping the ball up. I could do things with a ball. It's probably commonplace now, but, I could take the ball, when I went to high school, I could put the ball on my right foot and I could flick it up and it would land on my head without bouncing like a feather. I could bounce it on my head for 10, 15, 20 minutes. I could keep the ball up for thousands easily, because that's all I'd really done. I'd mastered football at a really young age because of the time I got into it. And I remember Cooper coming. Number one, he wouldn't wear a green bib, and I was still a big Celtic fan at the time, but Cooper wouldn't wear a green bib in training. He used to take that stuff quite serious, and there was very much, it was Rangers Protestant dominant. My dad was a local Catholic businessman. My dad was a really successful businessman, and probably quite vocal with it, and I was a very vocal Celtic fan at the time. And because of Big Tam and Wee Tam, little and large, because of their allegiance to the Gers, to Rangers, there was absolutely, there was something there, and I just don't think they liked me. I think it was simple as that. They just didn't like me, which was fair enough. That was fair. I didn't like them. I really didn't like them. And I remember when Cooper came in, and one of the first days he was there, it was like he was flexing. He was going about, and he was the man. He was like a superstar, David Cooper, pure class. God rest his soul. God bless him. What a football player, and a good human being as well. David Cooper, he was. But the challenge was laid down to the apprentices at the end of the day. All the pros were away, and it's like, right, who's the best? Who's the best at keeping them up? A challenges to a keep you up contest. And Cooper was he was a man for gambling. He loved the gambling. He used to go to the bookies. I don't think he gambled a lot, but he loved the gambling, the horses, and right, who wants a challenge for keep you up? And straight away, I was like, I'm having this. I'm having this Rangers man, he was like the enemy as a Celtic fan, which is funny now looking back. And he challenged me a keep you up contest, which I beat him. I beat him, no problem. He did about 60 or 70, and I could do that in my head without even trying. So I took a fiver off him. It took me about a week to get it off him, and I wish to God I'd got him to sign it. And I don't even know what it is now. I think I lost it in a house move. But I took a fiver off Davy Cooper. That's one of my claims to fame. My football career, it's probably 17, 18, in the dressing room at Fir Park, keeping the ball up, beat Davy Cooper. And, you know, so it should have been a great time. It really was. We had a great team, with a great youth team. Phil O'Donnell was in my team. God rest his soul. And interestingly enough, you know, the amount of people that died way too young, really sadly, from that group. Davy Cooper obviously passed early, Phil O'Donnell passed early within my team. A really good friend of mine, Paul McGrillen, passed. There was another probably 2 or 3 at that time that either they lost their lives or took their lives. And right at that time when I played at Motherwell, and every one of them was in the left hand. They're all left-footed and all played on the left hand side. It was just very, very interesting looking back. And at a time when, at the end of my second season with Motherwell, when I left Motherwell, I was basically like, and in the second year as well, I still scored over 70 goals. And I remember the pros at the time were saying, "You know, been offered a contract yet? What are they doing?" But I knew I wasn't going to be there. So when Tam took me in and basically says, "Look, beat it, we don't want you," it was a sign. It was a feeling of relief, and it was time for me to kick on. I was then, at that time, I was better. I was playing almost every week. I was still getting the occasional flare-ups with the groin injury and stuff. I'd been getting full-time physio treatment from the physio at Motherwell at the time. There's some stories involved in that. Mr. Hart, John Hart, and when I left Motherwell, it was like a free agent, and I felt a sense of relief. I really felt like, okay, like what now? What can I do? I've had a couple of years, you know, full-time training. I was rattling goals in, and then I decided to go and play amateur. I could have went to a couple of second division teams, but I decided to go and play amateur. There was an under-21 team, Fergusley United, who were a kind of feeder team to the bigger teams, and the guy who came and signed me basically promised me, he says, come and play with us for a year, and I'll get you a club. We'll get you in somewhere. And that's what I did. I went and had fun for the first time in my life with football. Up to that point, it had been dead serious. I used to go on holiday with the boys, and they would go out partying and drinking, even at a young age, you know, like 15, 16, 17, and I would go to bed early. I'd go up early and go to mass. I'd go up early and go for a run. Never drank, you know, they were out smoking dope, and that wasn't me. Every single thing that I did was towards playing football. And I had about a year with Fergusley-ish. Had some offers for different clubs, ended up going as a trialist and played in a game over at Airdrie. What's the name of the team in Airdrie? Is it Airdrie? Albion Rovers, that's the name. Albion Rovers. Went and played a trial with Albion Rovers, and after the game, I was going on holiday that night with Mum and Dad, and they offered me £500 to sign there and then. But I was still thinking of Man United. I still thought I was going to get back to being, you know, a superstar again. So I respectfully declined and said that I was going to think about it on holiday. But interestingly enough, the team that we played against was Queen's Park Rangers, who were based at Hampden. And by the time I'd left there, they had basically contacted me and said, "Listen, come and sign with us. If you come and sign with us, it's part-time, you can still go to your work during the day." At the time, I was working as an apprentice joiner, window fitter with my dad, to make me stronger, and I suppose at the time to give me a wee bit more about me. I felt at the time I was a wee bit soft, maybe. It was kind of to tough me up out in the building sites, which I'd been doing for about probably, I just started then, I was probably 17, 18, and I was out in the building sites in the rain, you know, working. I said we always worked to earn your money. And I remember getting dropped off at the first building site. My dad basically booted me out and gave him his best trade and said, "Right, teach him everything you know." And that was me. I became a window fitting kind of joiner type guy, which was great. So it enabled me to do that during the day. And then Queen's Park, the thing with Queen's Park, they were amateur status. You were playing at Hampden every week. They were amateur status, so that if anybody came in and signed you, then the signing on fee, instead of it going to the club, if I'd signed for Albion Rovers for £500, if I'd then been signed on to one of the bigger teams, which was absolutely the plan, then they would get the transfer money. But if I went to Queen's Park, then the transfer money would have became mine. You know, so again, I had financial advisors at 15. That's how. Sounds ridiculous now, but they were planning for all the money I was going to make at football. So to go and sign with Queen's Park, play at Hampden, train a couple of times a week, and the manager at the time, Eddie Hunter, was just brilliant. He was an absolute maniac, a wild man, just really really, really loud, really vocal. A great coach, very charismatic, loved me, absolutely loved me, and I loved it. I loved the idea of it. Went and signed for them, and again I went to Queen's Park, and it didn't happen. I just wasn't well. I wasn't well all the time. I would be sitting either on the bench ready to go on, and I'd be come down like flu symptoms where I'd be exhausted. And I'd have to say to him, like, I don't think I can go in here, and I'd be like, fuck, you're ready to go into Hampden, there's 15 minutes to go, it's one each, we could do with a goal, that kind of stuff, and I wasn't healthy, and obviously my confidence, even with the training and especially the games as well, sometimes it would be completely normal and I would be absolutely flying, and then, other times it was terrible, and it was very frustrating for me, very frustrating for the management team, very frustrating for my family, and possibly for the first time, I started to think about this wasn't going to happen, which was terrifying. And I remember the night where I stopped. I remember the night when I gave it up. I gave up my dreams. We were supposed to be playing, they played Rangers at Ibrox, and might have been the League Cup. It was like one of the early rounds of the League Cup, and I'd played 2 or 3 games up to this. And I remember before we left for Ibrox, and I thought going and playing against Rangers at Ibrox was brilliant, a proper professional game as an amateur. Was a huge step in the right direction, and the previous week I'd been down playing against Morton at Capello, the reserves, and after 15 minutes I'd take him off. I remember leaving Capello, which is depressing enough, what a place it is, but walking off in the rain, getting into a dirty changing room, and I'm just thinking, this isn't it. This isn't how it's meant to be. I'm meant for better than this. This isn't what I want to do. And then fast forward a week later, we're going to Ibrox, you get a wee taste of something, and then just before it, Mr. Hunter basically said I wasn't even named, wasn't even on the bench, which I understand. They probably couldn't take the gamble that I would go there and wasn't healthy enough to play. And I remember as the team was getting ready to leave, I just thought, I'm done with this. I'm finished. I don't want to do this anymore. I would had enough of it. I was broken with it. And I left Hampden that night. They went to Ibrox, and I don't even know how the game went. Didn't even hear anything about it. And I basically hung my boots up. I gave it up, and I chucked it. And that was the night that I gave up my dreams. That was the night that I basically decided, from the age of 2 years old up until I was 19, 20 at the time, probably 19. I decided I wasn't going to be a footballer anymore. And it was a really significant part of my life, and portion of my life. And I really I wasn't sad, I was relieved. So then it was right, what are you going to do? And it was a business, it was a family business, which had always been like an insurance policy up to that point. It had always been, like if the Fitbit doesn't work out, then this is going to be here for you. For most people, they used to say like education, get your education. I remember the scouts at the time saying like get an education to fall back on. I'm like, the business is there. If ever, my dad was making a fortune at the time, really successful. One of his businesses was travel agents. We were on holiday all the time. Life was really good. Work hard, play hard, earn the money. That was my life. And, so great, kind of like I suppose like a net that I was caught with, the family business being there, really grateful for that. And then freedom for the first time in my life. I then had the ability to do what I wanted. I was earning good money at the time. But at this point, I was earning probably close to 500, 600, 700, 800 quid a week, fitting windows, out doing homers at the weekend, getting wee cash jobs, like helping build houses, learning how to put kits up with houses. I was making good money, working really hard, 5, 6 o'clock every morning, onto the building sites, like learning my trade to begin with. Got it really, really quickly. I was always good with my hands, so I could do stuff like that, and I could make good money at it, which was great. So I had some money in my pocket, I had freedom, I had time, I had nothing basically holding me back. And I decided to go down a very different route, which was partying. I decided to start partying, which up to that point I'd never done. And the timing of it was incredible. I remember there was a big nightclub had just opened in the tunnel. And this point in my life, my friends had been going out, they'd been like smoking dope, they'd been like taking recreational drugs. Ecstasy had just became a thing. Dance music from America was coming in, house music was coming in, the whole acid, people taking acid. You heard these stories of people being in Ibiza, and I certainly saw it in Tenerife, my last holiday before I basically went from being a footballer to just being, a normal guy. You would see people on acid, and it just looked, drugs to me were the devil. Anybody that took drugs, anybody that smoked cigarettes, anybody that drank alcohol was just a loser to me. You know, I had nothing to do with them. I was this like model professional for a really young age. Everything I did was towards playing football, even as a kid. You know, on a Sunday morning, I would be out running and putting 5-10 mile runs in, you know, and working on stretching and keeping the ball up and working on my left foot, my weaknesses, and thinking about the game the next week. And that's just what I did, you know. So really interesting, you know, with all this freedom and a wee bit of money. And the environment of my pals. We went to a nightclub. It was actually one of the boys for Queen's Park, one of the boys for Glasgow. And it's like Tunnel tomorrow night. Tunnel nightclub had just opened in Glasgow. Went to the Tunnel, and before you knew it, I was introduced to recreational drugs. You know, I really was. It was fascinating how it unfolded, how it worked out. First time it happened, first time I took recreational drugs, nothing happened. So I had to go back in the next night and see how it went together. And the second night I got the experience. First time I took drugs was ecstasy. That was the first recreational drug that I took. And it put me on a path, and it put me on a direction for the next, I would say, 3 or 4 years that I really enjoyed. I loved it. I absolutely loved the freedom. I was working 5-6 days a week. I was earning really good money. I was free. I could do what I wanted. On a Thursday night, we could easily get into Glasgow. We could go for a couple of beers. We could go for a game of pool. I could get up early the next morning, go to work, and it was just great. It was freedom. There was no worry. There was no stress. The relief of like not trying to be a footballer was fantastic. And I've always been very addictive. I'm going to be speaking about addiction a lot on this. I've been addicted to so many things in my life, a lot of them really positive, but also negative as well. And recreational drugs at that stage of my life, at a time when I was needing a void filled, it was like the perfect storm for me. And I had 3 or 4 years of, you know, Friday night, Saturday night, it would be like one ecstasy tablet and that would be it. I started smoking a wee bit of hash at the time, like cannabis you would burn in a tobacco. I'm smiling, and I'm not trying to glorify this or make it better than it was, but it was just a time of real freedom for me. It was a time when I learned a lot of stuff, especially relating to, you know, the experiences you would get in the nightclub, especially with ecstasy. Like the feelings of ecstasy at the time, and at the time the ecstasy tablets, you know, I hear stories now of, you know, what people are up to and the potency. At the time when it just started, it was obviously designed to sell it to you, because the experience was something I'd never been through before. You know, you talk about the feelings of freedom and being joyful, and unconditional love. You know, you remember just grabbing people and hugging them. There was never any fighting. There was none of that stuff. There was never any and this was in Glasgow, right in the city centre of Glasgow, you know, one of the hardest cities in the world. And it was just this time of, I suppose, optimism, you know, coming out of the 80s and all the stuff the country was going through. I grew up with the miners' strikes and, you know, the Ravenscraig and down in where I grew up, you know, the coal strikes and the fighting and the bitterness and the separation and the Falklands War and all that. It was just a really hard time. And I think the optimism that came for us, my generation at that time, it was absolutely perfect. It was the perfect storm for me. And I had a good 3 or 4 years at it. I really did. I met my wife during that time, not through drugs, a family wedding. And straight away, as soon as we met, I was 19, going on 20 at the time. I just knew she was the one. We're still together to this day. My girl, Jill, God bless her, just only goodness, the purest of beings, an absolute a beam of light. I met her during that time. And it would be Friday night, Saturday night, out partying with my pals, or not with my wife, my girl, but out with the boys. And then during the week, you'd be working hard. You know, I used to go in. Jill had a wee flat in the West End. She had a bedsit, actually, a bedroom and a flat. And I would basically leave there at 5 in the morning, Monday to Friday. I would drive back to the family business, which was a 45-minute drive. I would load up with windows. A lot of times I'd drive back into Glasgow and then work all day, fitting windows, earning money, then get back there at night time. And it was like a student flat at the time. None of them were working really. I had part-time jobs. And they'd all be doing their thing up to 2-3 in the morning. I'd be like trying to get to sleep, and still had that serious bit in me. And then, you know, up in the morning time when they sleep, having to drive back and go and get on about the work. And that was the way, and I enjoyed it. I made good money, had a great life, had a fantastic time. At the time, one of the guys in the flat had befriended another guy who was a DJ. He was in fact, he was the first ever techno DJ in Scotland. A man called Lars Sandberg, Big Funk the Void. And when the flat split up, the guy who Davey's name was, we Dave, one of my first, a really good friend at the time. He had became friendly with Big Lars, and Lars was this techno DJ who worked in a record shop. And because I was party at the weekends, I would then start getting into buying records. I bought a set of decks. And then before he knew it, me being me, with a wee bit of cash and just the ability to go and do what I wanted, I got a full recording studio, analogue recording studio. I was making dance music, and I decided I was going to become a DJ. That was my plan, to become a techno house DJ with some great music. It was none of the rave stuff. It was more it was a lot of the kind of French and European, beautiful music, a lot of very subtle, really kind of nice, good for the mind, for the soul. Dance music was what I was into. Very minimal, very, very easy listening, and made you feel fantastic, especially when you added in, things like the recreational drugs that were custom made. And it all came to a head, I suppose. The summer of 1996 was everything changed for me, because being disillusioned with the football, giving up, the idea of I wanted to be fitting windows for the rest of my life, and what did I want to do to make myself happy? And it was DJing. I decided I was going to be a DJ. So by this point, I had thousands of records, had a recording studio. I believe it was good enough. I absolutely was good enough. I'd been playing in different bars and things, and wanted to become a professional DJ. And at the time, my boyhood best friend was getting married. He was going on his stag do to Ibiza, which he didn't invite me on, which was interesting, which didn't stop me. Once I heard about it, I invited myself. And in fact, Big Lars was meant to come with me, and he got an offer to go and play. He was just get back DJing again. He'd been offered for years and just get back into it. And he was going to play a club in Germany. I think it was the E-Werk it was called. It was one of the big techno clubs in the world. He got an offer to go there. He'd just get back into it professionally. Me and him had been over to Barcelona and Madrid. I went and supported him as a friend, not as a DJ, just to see it went together, with a few days in Barcelona and then Madrid, and came back and decided that's what I wanted to do because of what I'd seen. And just before we went to Ibiza, to this stag do, he went to Germany and I went to Ibiza myself. And Ibiza is where everything went wrong, or went right, depending on how you look at it. That's where the things absolutely changed for me. The first night in Ibiza, when we got there, and I'd heard the stories about it, not really to the degree I probably should have. It never interested me. It never really had much a calling for me. But when I got there, I was really into it. I was really looking forward to it. And the first night when I got there was when my life changed. That was when everything changed for me. I got there, as you do, had a pill, had an ecstasy tablet the first night I was there. And that pill, whatever was in it, it caused me to go and have an experience which I had never had before. Something happened very, very quickly. I had incredible pains in my head. Didn't feel good. I had to leave the club we were in straight away just because of the pain in my head. And then found myself back in my room, back in the hotel. I was in a separate hotel from the guys I was with. And then the next 5 or 6 days are just a blur, really. I had no food. I don't believe I drank any water. I believe that pill, I had a mental breakdown the first night. Made me really not well. And I never took any more drugs the rest of the time I was there. I didn't do anything bad. I was basically walking about. I was still trying to find work. I took a big bag of white label records with me, and I was still trying to find work over, and I was going to get a job as a DJ. So I'd be walking about, really no well, in a place where you don't want to be in that situation the way that I was. Absolutely. Some of the things that I saw in terms of how the police were treating people. I remember sitting in a wall one night and this young couple were walking home. I would sit and watch all the clubbers, the vampires as I called them, getting home for the club. I'd be sitting there, sitting clean as a whistle, no well, really, really no well, full mental breakdown. I'd be sleeping on the beach. I would wake up, I wasn't in a great place. But I remember watching this one night with this young couple was walking home, and these 2 local police approached them. And within 30 seconds, the tin of mace or the pepper spray, whatever it was out, and they'd sprayed them in their face, and they were beating them with batons, and just a horrible place, a real kind of, no good. Watching it at the time, watching that beating take place, I remember thinking, if that ever comes anywhere near me, that's not what's going to happen. I was just like, they 2 police need to pay for that. And looking back now, be careful what you wish for, because about a couple of days later, me sitting in a bar, I believe I bought drinks for everybody at the bar, and my card had been stolen, my wallet, and emptied. somebody's place that I'd been in, somebody's house or flat I'd been in. One of the workers had basically taken my wallet and emptied my bank account. How they did it, I don't know. But I basically bought drinks for everybody at the bar. The second last day I was there, and obviously when the card was declined, they called the police, and I'm 99% sure it was the same two police that had maced. It was in the same area, the same kind of street where it had happened. So these same two police came to arrest me, and because of my state of mind, because of where I was at that time, that wasn't happening. There's no way, and they couldn't do it. They couldn't basically get me into the back of the van or get me under handcuffs. So the Garda Civil were called the military police. And they guys don't play. Let me tell you something about them. Anybody that's gone to the Balearics this summer, be very careful, because they don't play. As I found out, they managed to get me back into the van. They took me back to the military compound, and then what happened that night. It lasted about a day and a half. But what happened that night in particular would be enough to write a book on its own about. It was just the most crazy, tragic, life-changing series of events. I remember at the time I was really not well. I was right in the middle of a mental breakdown. One of the things when I was in the cells, when they came in at the beginning, I had no water for the whole time I'd been there, so I was completely dehydrated, really not well, and they brought in a big kind of 2-litre bottle of water, and the first thing I did was basically take the lid off it and basically pour it over one of my captors, which wasn't the best idea, and also the food as well. They had this kind of foil wrapped baguette, and I think I hit them with that as well. So the police came in, the military police came in, into this big holding cell, this big compound. So it was in 2 levels, and 3 or 4 of them, I think it was 4 of them, came in at the one time. And for whatever reason, I seemed to, I'd turned into this kind of mixed martial artist, probably during the day that I'd got. The beating that I took on the sidewalk with a pair of shorts on, what the military police had to do to get me in the back of the van was barbaric. And I remember at one point, they were basically slamming my left shin. It was jamming the door, and they were slamming the door against my shin to get me into the back of the van. Couldn't feel it. I was so far gone by this point, I couldn't feel it. Obviously the adrenaline and all that kind of stuff going through me. But when they took me back to the cells, when they all came in at the one time, I managed to slip out the door and basically escaped out the military compound, which sounds as if it sounds madness, but that's literally what happened. And I'm running along the street and getting chased by this military police, and then the series of events that basically happened, how they got me back to the cells, and then what they did to me when they come back into the cells. There was no chance of a second escape. The door was firmly locked behind me, and I experienced, I would call it, literal torture. Between the batons and between the pistol whipping and between the water kind of hose cannon, what they did to me physically, what it did to me obviously mentally and emotionally. That first night, it changed me, obviously. It almost cost me my life. That was the starting point of this bit of the journey. That first night in those cells in Ibiza, I believe they almost beat me to death. And for whatever reason, I was able to make my way through it. And I still don't know to this day how I was able to get out of the country in terms of, what had happened and what I went through. My dad came and got me. He had a wee house in Mallorca at the time. He was given a call from the lads I'd been on the stag do with, and he came and got me, took me back to Mallorca. And then the first night in Mallorca, God bless my mum and dad, and the amount of guilt and shame for what I did to them during that period, that time when I was really, really not well. And what they had to put up with over in Mallorca. They're on holiday, they came and got me, and then the first night I was there, basically arrested again and taken to hospital. The police that got me, my dad, I think he actually bribed them. They took me to hospital. That was the only condition, I believe, that I was able to be released, that I was going to hospital. And then into a 5-star hospital, which they all were then. The private hospitals were incredible there. And they basically put me back together again. They basically repaired my hand. My hand was broken, my face was smashed up, my feet was smashed up. Just some of the things that they did to me, stamping on my bare feet with these big kind of military boots. And I remember the surgeon at the time, my dad told me this years later, but the surgeon at the time couldn't believe I wasn't dead because of the beating that I'd had. They couldn't believe my heart hadn't burst. My body was covered in hematomas, black and blue head to toe. My head was all just completely messed up, smashed nose, which had been stitched up. When I got back to the compound, they took me to a medical, a wee medical clinic, and they basically stitched me up and put me back together again. But they couldn't believe my heart hadn't burst, and they couldn't believe I didn't have brain damage as well. I remember the MRI scan, that was a big thing, the brain damage, because of how I was acting. I was in this hypermanic state of just being all over the place. And, you know, from being in those hospitals where, you know, I was just so far gone, because they found drugs in my system. One of the tests, they obviously found drugs in my system. So they basically put me into a drug rehabilitation centre over in Mallorca. And again, that was like a 5-star resort. Swimming pool, tennis courts. Most of the people in there was like heroin. So it was like a private, almost heroin clinic. And after 2 or 3 days, that wasn't for me. There's some great stories about that place. I've just actually finished writing my book, which is also called Darkness to Light, which is my story. And some of the stories, one of the guys in there, Big Dutchy, who basically became he was an inmate, he was a patient, and my dad was giving him money to look after me. And he realised that the medication wasn't working at one point, and then he went and he got some herbal medicine, some Dutch herbal medicine, some cannabis, and it just set me off my nut. I went absolutely bananas again, and the only option at the time was to basically, they put me in a mental hospital. That's where it started. That's where the kind of real kind of seriousness of it started. Realising that the normal system and being in hospitals and doctors and therapy wasn't going to work for me. I was so far gone because of the beatings, because of whatever I'd experienced, because of what the ecstasy and Ibiza had done to me. But the only option was to basically section me into a mental hospital right in the centre of Palma. I remember the first night being chained to a bed in the middle of the summer in 1996, and actually having to pee myself. They wouldn't let me up for the toilet, and this kind of barred windows, kind of chained to a bed, and just thinking, what happened? You know, how did I get here? And there's something about that, you know, your freedom taken away, as I did. You know, when you actually can't leave somewhere, it's like being in jail. You know, and for me, a guy who had never been in trouble with the police before, had never been, you know, anything. That wasn't me. I was just a nice, normal, good human being. You know, there was none of that. You know, so how quickly I got from that to basically being here in a mental hospital, chained to a bed, no real sign of when I was going to get out, no real sign of whether I was even going to make it in terms of how I was going to get back. And that was me for, you know, the summer of 1996. That's where this journey began. Summer of 1996, 2 to 3 months, I believe I was in that hospital. Too sick to travel home. The only way to let me travel home was a private jet with 2 doctors. They came and got me and they took me back. And then when I got back here, straight into another rehab centre because of the drugs in my system. It was like a 12-step private centre down in the borders, down beside Peebles. Lasted 2 days in there, signed myself out. I was sitting in the first ever meeting with this serum. I was detoxing from the drugs I was given, this serum coming out my eyes, which wasn't ideal. And then remember thinking about that was my first exposure to the 12 steps. One of the people were leaving there that day and they were talking about their journey, and I remember seeing this young guy and talking about his addictions, and I'm thinking, this isn't the place for me, I don't need to be here. So I signed myself out. That wasn't the place I needed home. Hadn't been home in many months. I wanted back to my own bed, my own room, but I was really sick, I was really not well, and signed myself out against their best wishes. And went back home into an environment that my mum and dad absolutely couldn't handle, especially where I was at the time. I was mental, I was really not well, and after a really short period of time, it was a sneaky move by the private hospital down in Peebles. They asked if I'd go and get a second opinion, which I agreed to because I really wasn't well. I wasn't getting any better. This was probably a couple of weeks after I'd left there. And they took me up to a place called Hartwood Mental Institute, psychiatric hospital, I suppose would be the correct term, which was a terrifying place. I remember hearing about it growing up, you know, and if you were at a certain state of mind, they would basically take you to Hartwood and throw away the key. That's the stuff that we grew up with. So here's me going up to Hartwood, you know, for a second opinion. And it was a trick, you know, they took me up and I met the doctor and they basically sectioned me again. They basically took me in and they basically put me in a room under 24-hour supervision, and they started to medicate me. They medicated me beyond anything I believe any human being should get to stabilise me, I suppose. Probably did me good at the time, possibly. But again, I spent the next couple of months in there. First night, again, I was chained to bed in there one night as well. The first night I was in there to protect myself, you know, for my own safety. And then 30, 40 pills a day, you know, which by that point, right through the summer, in Mallorca, they'd be giving me bazookas, they called them. It was a game every day. It was 4 or 5 big burly like male nurses would come and get me and track me down and pin me to the floor, and they'd put these big bazookas into my butt, and that would me, after 5 or 10 minutes, the next 12 to 16 hours, you were basically zonked, like a drooling mess lying sleeping in your bed. And then to go from that, you know, into Hartwood under the care of, you know, the best care in the country, I suppose, in terms of certainly the normal care in the country for mental health. And I remember at the time, like, my dad asking the doctor, like, how long is he going to be here? How long is he going to be off this? And at the time, they were basically saying, this might be it forever. You might never, ever get back from this. And I was having a great time by this point. I had kind of stabilised myself with the medication. They'd stabilised me with the medication. I was a table tennis champion. I was in a good mood. I felt great all the time. I was always up because of the pills, I suppose. And then towards the summer, to the end of the summer, into autumn, into Christmas time, of 1996, where they started to reduce the medication. Then when things started to change, and the darkness absolutely started to come in. They stopped all my pills just before Christmas, and I remember having a crash that you wouldn't wish on anybody. You really wouldn't. And that crash, it happened, I was in at the Priory in Glasgow, signed myself into the Priory, which was a private clinic, and because my mum and dad's means, because of their ability to pay for it, I was getting the best care in the country. But I remember at the time, the wee doctor that was looking after me was, every time I seen him, he was terrified. He would run away from me. And I remember sitting in these therapy sessions, like sitting with an acorn and describing like why you're the way you are, or why your life went so badly. That was one of the questions, and I'm thinking, this doesn't work. There's something about this environment, the pills, the therapies. Richard Barnley used to call them the therapists. Sitting talking about how bad you are, or how no well you are, and why that doesn't work. Now what I know about mental health and how you get people back to being better again, I know why that doesn't work. At the time, I didn't know. I had no experience with any of this. I just knew that the way I was doing it wasn't working for me. So in the Priory, they stopped all the pills, and then they started the pills again when I went into the Priory. And they were talking about things like lithium and how to stabilise my brain, and you're looking at the side effects, what it does to your liver, and this is before the internet really, so you're really kind of making it up as you go along. It was a really kind of challenging and uncertain time, to say the least. I was broken in every way. Mental, nervous, emotional breakdown, spiritually broken in terms of, any realisation or, clue as to who I was or what this life experience was all about. That's where I was from the summer of 1996 right up to kind of the January of 1997. And after leaving the Priory, signing myself out of there and, really not knowing which way to turn, all the therapies we believe had been tried, all the doctors, the pills, the medications, I was absolutely depressed. I was suicidal. I was in a place of, I would call, hopelessness, where I had no feelings, I had no emotions. I remember sitting with my wife, we went up to Aviemore for a couple of days, and I remember sitting going, I can't feel anything, I have no feelings, and that was terrifying. The thought that you might not have any feelings or emotions ever again, just this real feeling of blackness, it was the worst that I was. That was the kind of lowest point for me. And then, after, really seeing any way out of it, there was an opportunity to work with a man who had known for probably the previous year or so. He was a local physiotherapist. He was working as a part-time, he was a social worker, I do believe, at the time, and he was also into personal development, which I didn't know at the time, but he was helping people with different things. He was helping them with shiatsu, and he was like a physio, so he was massaging people, but he was also into personal development, which I'd never even heard of before. And he came up and he took me through a session which lasted about 2 or 3 hours for the first time, and that was the day that changed my life. That was the time where the light was brought back into my life. And what basically happened was very, very simple. The man took me through a breathing session. He took me through some yoga nidra. Anybody that knows yoga, it's basically a guided relaxation where they take you in and you de-escalate your stress through breath works, just some gentle, intentional breathing. I went completely out of body, which I didn't know about, and for about 20 years I always used to say I'd never been out of body, but at that time, on that day, I went completely out of body. I remember lying on the kind of ceiling, looking down at my body. Didn't know that for about 20 years, and I had this realisation in meditation one morning that I'd went completely out of body, which gave me a break from me. It gave me a break from the madness I was living at that time, the PTSD at the time because of what the soldiers done, stuff for childhood, the vaccine damage, the broken dreams with Manchester United, and all that stuff was coming up, stuff I dealt with at different stages. My life was starting to surface. It was a horrible time. It was a terrible time. And this man came in and gave me a break from it just by basically putting me through a very basic breathwork session, some guided relaxation. And he brought me back, and I remember standing up, and everything had changed. The whole world had changed for me. It was almost as if the light had went back on again. I had a wee glimpse, a memory, and a reconnection back to who I was, not just before Ibiza, but way before the drugs and anything else. Everything had changed. And then even more significantly, and I can feel myself getting emotional now talking about this, God bless his soul, man. But what he gave me was something that I don't even know that he knows to this day that he gave me. He gave me the experience, the breath work, and he brought me back. But at the end of the session, just before he left, what he said to me was very significant. What he says was, listen, son, everything's going to be fine. You're going to be okay. And that hope to somebody who is hopeless, and the way that he was able to pull me out of that hole of despair and depression and anxiety, panic attacks, just broken. Blackness you wouldn't wish it on another human being. Hopelessness is somebody you wouldn't wish it on another human being. So when somebody gives you hope and says to you, listen son, everything is going to be okay, everything changed. My entire life changed. And I knew that this man was somebody that I wanted to be around about. I knew it was somebody who could help me. He was very much into personal development. I believe I saw him that same week. I had another session down at his house. He had a wee kind of back bedroom office he converted where he was doing shiatsu. And when you went in, there was always different books of personal very much. Some of these books are 25, 26 years old. That right at the very beginning, whatever he was doing in terms of personal development, I was into. He'd been to see Tony Robbins that summer, I believe, 1996. So when I was in hospital, he'd been to see Tony Robbins, and he was talking about Tony Robbins, thousands and thousands of people, and how much it was outside his comfort zone, and the experiences that he'd had, and about feeling good and taking back your power. And at the time, Tony Robbins, it was fear into power, unleash the power within. That was his big thing. I've actually got the thingy down there. The very first time I saw Tony Robbins was in 1998. I saw Richard Bandler in 1987, but 1980 was Tony Robbins, and it was all about taking back your power, fear into power. And he was taught, Lawrence Clifford, the man's name is, who's got a business called Mind and Body Management. Lawrence was a man that literally gave me the Oz branch that saved my life, the man that gave me hope. And, you know, from that day, anything that he did, I wanted to be on about. We went on a journey together. I started looking at personal development. I went to see Richard Bandler, as I just mentioned, in 1997, that would be, down in London. We spent 7-8 days with Richard Bandler, a man called Michael Breen as well, and Paul McKenna, the famous Paul McKenna, the TV hypnotist. He was there as well. The three of them. Richard Bandler was the foremost clinical hypnotherapist in the world, certainly one of the most famous. Invented NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, and Bandler would come in and basically speak to you for a couple of hours, and he would tell you stories about taking acid and being a Hell's Angel in LA, and his stories about ganglands growing up in not LA, San Francisco. He grew up. He would talk about, you know, his therapy stories about helping people, and whatever he was doing. Paul McKenna said that he used to teach you on 6 or 7 different levels, conscious and unconscious. NLP was very interesting, very difficult to understand, but the way that Bandler did it, and he created it, you know, so he would just come in, he would just use, and he said he created NLP just so he could do anything he wanted. He was a mathematician, I do believe, Bandler. And his partner, John Grinder, was a linguist, so they basically took this thing, in his words, he could do whatever he wanted. He could basically do anything he wanted, and he was using his therapy techniques. Some of the stories about Bandler and what he would do to basically bring people back from things you don't get back from, not only humorous, but verging on the miraculous. You know, he told a story about how this guy thought he was Jesus. I used to see that a lot. People think they were Jesus when they're in these hospitals. And Bandler, the day before, this is his story, the day before, you know, it was Easter Sunday, and he gets a couple of the orderlies, my wife just gone away, a couple of the orderlies, basically, but he brought them in dressed as centurions, and they measured this guy up for a cross. You know, and this catatonic, this human being that basically, you know, hadn't spoke for years, the next day they appear with this mock made up cross as if they're going to crucify him, and all of a sudden the guy remembers that he's not Jesus and gets back to normal again. The Bandler had some incredible stories and ways of helping people through therapy. And I came back from that a different human being. Personal development, you know, and taking back control and taking back your power. I saw Robbins for the first time a year later. When I went to Richard Bandler, only thing that people were talking about was with Anthony Robbins. He was doing workshops at the time, events, and I saw him in 1998, which was all about, you know, taking back control, how you stand, how you breathe. Robbins was the first person I really heard talking about breathing, the power of breath. I heard one of his trainers
The last day was living health. The Monday was about living health. And they basically said, if you breathe this way, you will never get cancer. And cancer, when I grew up, was a huge thing. My grand died of cancer, and it was a real fear for me, was getting cancer. So hearing that breath work, this specific type of breathing, what it did to your blood and the oxygenation of your system, how basically you would never have cancer. So, personal development and Anthony Robbins. First time I saw Robbins was 10,000 people. Wembley, Twin Towers, the summer of 1998, that would have been. 1998 was the first time I saw Tony Robbins. 10,000 people. He was on stage between 16 and 18 hours every single day. He never left. The man was just incredible. What he did to people, how he brought people up on stage with therapies. One of the young girls had been raped as a child. I remember she was 36, I believe, at the time. She looked about 136. And I remember thinking as he brought this girl up on stage, what is he going to do here? What can you do with this? And inside about 10, 15 minutes, she became a new human being. That the black marks under her eyes were literally gone. She reintegrated back into herself. All through I didn't know what he was doing. He was talking to her and he was doing these different things, and fascinating to watch. And because Lawrence had been on this journey way longer than me, he'd been at it probably 2, 3, 4 years by this point. He was starting to teach me and show me the things that he was doing as to how he was helping people. Lawrence was working as a coach as well, part-time. So he was helping people with different things. And I suppose that was the start of me kind of really, getting on about a different way of living. Everything changed. The lights come back on for me very, very quickly. I started my own wee business. I was with my girl full time. We moved into this premises that I'm in just now. It's actually upstairs. The Vortex is downstairs, my home. My family home is upstairs. We started to, we were living together. The plan was absolutely to get married. I started my wee business. We started thinking about having a family, and it was a great time. That time, 1997, 1998, 1999, that was the start of the journey for me. But taking back control, taking back my power, from being chained to a mental institute, hospital bed, flying home with 2 doctors in a private jet. I mean, the stories, the things I experienced during that time, what I did to myself, what I did to my family, God forgive me, what I did to my mum and my dad and my brother and my girl, who basically loved me back to life, all of them. My dad cuddled me for a year to get me back, or at least 7 or 8 months. He basically gave up his business and spent every day with me. My girl, how she stood beside me during the process. And then I got to this place very, very quickly of personal development, where the books, the courses, the workshops, there was no internet really, so you were basically listening to cassettes. Zig Ziglar, one of my first teachers, used to call it University on Wheels. So me and Lawrence would buy a set of tape cassettes. Again, I've got them here. I've got the original ones here, back in the day. We'd pay there you go. There's Dr. Wayne Dyer, How to Be a No Limit Person. That's probably 26, 27 year old. Nightingale Conant. And Lawrence would buy the tape cassettes. And here they go. So there you go. That's the tape cassettes there. And he would record these and give me a set of the blanks, and I would drive about, fitting windies on the building sites, University on Wheels, learning, educating myself in the ways of, being empowered. The plan was to become, go and get it, whatever it was for me at this time. And, taking control, taking responsibility for my life was what it was all about. And from personal development is all about like being successful, setting the goals, getting the stuff, like being the man. That was absolutely the case at Tony Robbins, going and like fulfilling your potential, getting everything you were due. And for me, very quickly I realised that the answers weren't going to be in that for whatever reason. And because I had all this stuff growing up, I saw what money did to my dad's family. I saw what greed did to my dad's family. There's a whole load of stories in that in terms of what he experienced with his success and then the demise of his big business because of greed with family members and all that kind of stuff. I saw what money does to people, and also I had no desire, whatever those military police did to me, whatever that pill, whatever that experience did to me, I had no desire for the worldly goods. I just didn't have it anymore. So for some reason, for whatever reason, personal development was great. Personal development gave me my life back. It helped me to, stabilise and basically get back to living a normal life, I suppose. It gave me my life back again. But it wasn't until Wayne Dyer started talking about the spiritual journey and what that even was, and it's not about religion. He was talking about God in ways I'd never heard of it before. He was talking about, what God was. He was talking about, what spirituality was. He was talking a lot about the essence of the divine and the divine way, but also giving detailed, I suppose, instruction as to what you were able to do and probably supposed to do as a human being. This spiritual experience, this spiritual journey that we all have within us, and how so few people were talking about. That was the bit that really got me. So I basically, put down personal development and the desire to get the things and to be successful, and I went on a spiritual journey. And that spiritual journey started in, I would say, 1998, 1999-ish. I decided to learn about meditation. I decided I was going to become enlightened. That came through a quote from the Buddha. The Buddha says, once you hear the word enlightenment, nothing else will ever do. And I decided to become enlightened. Didn't know what it meant, didn't know what was going to be involved in it. I decided I was going to start getting up every single day and meditate. And I was going to, as long as it took, I was going to get there. And that started 1998, 1999, and I started being called out of bed. Wayne Dyer became my constant companion. I'd be called out of bed at 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, and I would sit in meditation, I would sit in silence. A great quote is, God's one and only voice is silence. All this stuff came through Wayne Dyer. Anything he was releasing, the books he was releasing at the time was about God, about meditation, about spirituality, things like spiritual solutions to every problem. He was talking about the great saints, talking about yogis, talking about St. Francis. All of his teachers, the stuff that he was writing about, they became my go-tos. Wayne Dyer became like my best pal. He really did. He became my constant companion. When I was driving about, fitting windows and my wee business, wherever I was, I had a set of earplugs in. I'd be listening to all this information, and basically I was like a sponge. And that journey of spiritual development, it started at that time, and it's been every single day to this day. 25, 26 years later, I have never missed a single day. It's been every single day in meditation. I changed my diet back in the day. I took away all the inflammation from my diet. I started juicing, I started blending, I started taking responsibility for my health. And enlightenment was the plan. Now, enlightenment, for those that don't know, is very simply the direct experience of the divinity that's in every single one of us. That's what enlightenment means. It's something that I believe I experienced. I believe I had conscious, direct contact with the divine. Some people call it God. It took me about 17 or 18 years of sitting in meditation every single day, morning, and most of the time at night as well. I cleaned up my diet. I cleaned up the input in terms of the people I was spending time with, the text that I was reading. These books are I've had hundreds of books, all to do with, personal development, spiritual development, diet, well-being, whether it was yoga. And yoga means, the purpose of yoga is to experience union with the divine. That's why people do yoga. It's not today some kind of predetermined moves. That's not what yoga is. One of the books I've got up here is How to Know God, which again came through Wayne Dyer. And it's there, How to Know God. And this is like the yogic aphorisms of Patanjali, the dude who basically created yoga. These were my teachers back in the day. At the time when people were still going to watch Celtic and Rangers and drink in the pubs, I was basically reading the yogic aphorisms of Patanjali, and nobody knew about it. For the first 17, 18 years, my wife and my Waynes were the only people that were running about it. They're the only ones that knew. I was basically trying to work this out for myself. I was trying to get this myself. I was trying to get to a place of that enlightened experience. I wanted to get to that place. Number one, my question was, who am I? Who the feck am I? That was my question. That was number one. And number two, what is this life experience all about? That was my questions right at the very beginning. What's it all about and who am I? That was a journey. That was the journey that I went on. And after 17 or 18 years, I was sitting in meditation one morning and I got it. I experienced it. It came in. This presence came in. Very difficult to do justice in words. And I've written about it extensively in my book. Again, it's hard to explain. You need to experience it. But what I experienced, that first time that it came in, that first time that it happened, it fixed everything. It really did. It lasted a couple of hours, probably 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. This presence came in, and you don't just experience, you don't just feel as if you're standing underneath God. It's not like that. You literally become it. It's like you become the field, you become everything. I talk about it and I say I became the tree and the blade of grass and the pigeon, universal consciousness, where I became everything. Never wanted to leave it, and if I could get back there, it's happened a few times since, but if I could get back there by my own free will, you would never see me. But what happened during that experience, what I got in that experience, which I believe was a direct experience of the divine, what I realised that is because it's in me, then it must be in everybody. That was one of the first things that I learned when I came back, because I wanted to give it to people. At that point, I was helping people with the stuff that I was doing, so how can I give this to people? And what it felt like was love. That's the best way to describe it. You can't do it justice in words, but what it felt like was love. Just love I had never experienced before. Unconditional love, I believe, is the way that we human beings experience that which we would call God. There's a great thing that says God is love. When I come back sitting in silence, for the first couple of hours, I was just reintegrating back into my body. Couldn't believe it just happened, especially after reading about the books and the yogic experiences and Wayne Dyer and being close a few times but not quite getting it. And then when it actually happened, when I came back, the first thing I thought, I was like, how can I give this to people? Whether that's the ego, I don't know. The intention was to help people. Everybody, because I'd done it, because I'd experienced this, I hadn't done it. I had done it to me because I was being blessed with this experience. It took me 17, 18 years every single day, changing the diet, changing the input, reading the books, travelling the world, listening to teachers, this devotional, like a fiend. My wife used to say, it's no motivation and it's no inspiration. What is it? It was like devotion. The devotion to experience the divine, that's what it was for me. And then when I came back, I'm no different from anybody else. I'm just a guy that grew up in building sites, playing football, supporting Celtic, swearing, fighting, that guy. I was just that guy. So if it's in me, then it must be in everybody. That was the realisation. And then the question became, how can I give this to people? And that changed everything. Because at the time, I was coaching people, I was helping people. The job that I was doing enabled me to meet a lot of people, so I was helping them with mental health and stuff that I'd learned. But once I experienced this, the whole world changed. And that experience and what it did to me, and then the subsequent steps in terms of after that, how things unfolded, how my path changed in terms of, I suppose, wanting to share these spiritual experiences with people. Breathwork came in properly. Probably 2-3 years later, 4 years later, I experienced a time when I had that experience where nothing really mattered anymore. Just the world and the things in the world. And Carlos Castaneda said the biggest challenge of a sorcerer. Now, a sorcerer, he would say, is someone who lives at the source. A sorcerer, someone who lives connected to the divine. The biggest challenge that a sorcerer faces is the numbing effects of daily awareness. And that was certainly the way for me. The circus, people, our ignorance being our only sin as a species. We live in ignorance. Ignorance just means that we don't know. The numbing effects of daily awareness and seeing what's in the newspapers and watching the news and the television, even to this day, I find that hugely challenging. Because once you've experienced this level of, the divinity that's in every single one of us, then nothing else really matters. So for a period of time, I was just bored. I didn't really, nothing was making sense. I had no enthusiasm in terms of what do I now do with it. I've had this fantastic experience. I can't get back there every single day. When you've tasted that, what else is there? And then, after a period of time, things started to level out. Ask the right questions with the right intention. We understand about manifestation, which I absolutely did by this point. One of my teachers, Abraham Hicks, came in about that time, who is the source of the law of attraction and how you manifest stuff, which the yogis have been talking about for the last 5,000 years, how you manifest things from the field into reality. When you're looking for a different way of doing things and you're looking for a different way of living, as I was at the time, you ask the right questions and things will start to change. And I was blessed, first and foremost, happened in here, 2016. Was the start of it. I do believe this next wave that I'm on just now, a lady came out and she did a thing called Angelic Reiki. Sounds like rainbows and unicorns. I had trained in Ushui Reiki, so energy work's a big part of what I'm all about in terms of these holistic practices, how to help people. Energy work changed my life. Again, I am very cynical. Unless I see it with my own eyes, I'm not interested. But this first experience, first time I was given Ushui Reiki was a training course. Lawrence went to a weekend course and says, you need to go and do this. And that was it. I just went. If Lawrence said go and do it, I just went and did it. Dead simple. And I went and did this course, and this lady put her hands on my neck, and she basically asked me, have you ever had your life threatened? And I had an exorcism. I really did. I had an exorcism that day. I had a knife in my shoulder for the previous 10 years. And that first afternoon, after this lady putting her hands on my neck, and also the people that are on the course as well, they basically put their hands on different parts of my body. But it lasted a couple of hours, I do believe, maybe 2-3 hours. I was lying on this bed, and just the tears and the relief and whatever it was, I had a knife in my shoulder. I believe it was when I was protecting myself from the police. this literal knife that I'd been in pain in for the last 10 years, and I knew it wasn't physical. Every time I'd lean against my shoulder, any time I slept on my shoulder, I'd be in agony. And when I left the bed that day, this knife was basically taken out my shoulder. So there's something in that energy work. Didn't know what it was. Practice of Sui Reiki was actually attuned to master level without even asking. I was basically doing energy work with people, and because of my spiritual practices with energy work, I would be connecting to the divine, it'd be coming through me. But Angelic Reiki was very different. And the first ever course I did in the Vortex was Abiel, God bless her soul, Abiel and her angels, energy work. She came in and she did an Angelic Reiki weekend. I did the first level 1 and 2, and then when she came here, I did the advanced level. And again, so cynical, but there was a man there who basically channeled archangels. And me being the cynic, I need to see it to experience it. But me, and there was another 5 of my students on the course that day. And what the information that archangel, when he channeled it later on that day, gave to me, just incredible in terms of nature and so many different things. I found myself that night down at the waterfall about 3-4 o'clock in the morning, and had an experience with Mother Nature that changed my life forever. And then off the back of that, I found Wim Hof. Wim Hof came into my life about 6 months later. So learning to breathe, I wouldn't say properly, but absolutely like forcefully, and how that changed the chemistry within your body. That came in as a result of this weekend event, and what was channeled through that archangel. Interestingly enough, the information that this man channeled for me, the 5 students, the information that came through for them, this guy didn't know any of it, we'd never seen him before, but the information that came through for them as well was so profound and exactly what they needed, because I'd worked with them in a professional way. But what it gave to me was, and the information that came through for me, I found Wim Hof 2016, breathwork and cold exposure, which literally changed my life. The breathwork, really powerful. But also learning the science. When I became a Wim Hof method instructor in 2017, the big part I was learning the science and learning about the nervous system and how the nervous system worked, and then obviously the benefits of cold exposure. I was one of the first people in the country to teach cold exposure. Back in the day, everybody thought I was mental. I was in the river almost every single day for 2 years, right through winter time, and I started doing live videos to help a cause, a charity at the time called Heal Scotland. The intention again was always just to help people, but I started to learn about the nervous system. I started to learn about what the body needs to be vital and healthy and all that kind of stuff. And that was a realisation for me at that time about the damage that was done with vaccines. That's when I really started to realise that my body had been hyper stimulated my whole life, and a chronic stress response. That's why I couldn't sleep. And it was great, I was up doing meditation, but I think where would I be if I didn't have that practice during the night? And the amount of people that I know that are up basically worrying during the night and basically making themselves sick during the night. But for me, obviously the spiritual journey, the meditation, learning about the nervous system, learning about the physical body, and then starting to look at all the stuff that went wrong with me, and then seeing those kind of patterns, I suppose, and trends and kind of these trails that are left behind with people that have similar experiences. And that was a turning point. That was when the Vortex opened 2016. The Wim Hof method training was in end of 2016 was when I found cold exposure, and then 2017 went and trained with Wim Hof, became a Wim Hof method instructor, added in the breathwork and cold exposure practices. I left Wim Hof probably about a year and a half later. There's a whole load of stories within that in terms of my relationship with Wim, my relationship with the method, the good stuff and the bad stuff, hugely beneficial for many things, but detrimental to so many in so many different ways, I do believe now. And I suppose now where I'm sitting, 2024, this is my 27th year working on this stuff. The intention with this work, I've got it for myself, I know how it works, I take full responsibility for my own life and everything that comes my way. The intention is to help people, the intention is to pass on the stuff that I've learned with shortcuts. And that's why I do believe that somebody coming in and learning how this goes together, learning how to breathe properly, learning how to relax, learning how to switch off your nervous system is a starter for 10. My whole thing is to reconnect people back into who they really are and what they really are, which I believe is divine. I believe we're human beings, we're children of God, we come from God. I believe that when we die, we go back to the divine. Again, when my mum passed, everything I'm talking about is through direct experience. So when my mum passed, my hand was on her heart, my hand was on her soul, and I could feel when her spirit left her body. Now I can close my eyes and I can feel where her spirit is just now. So death became an illusion to me, and this work is all about helping people find relief. And I suppose deprogramming, from the way we've been taught, the way we've actually been educated in what we believe to be true in this world. It's a time of massive change in the world. The world is in the bones of its arse. People are struggling. Waynes are struggling. Mental health, physical health, the amount of anxiety, the amount of depression, the amount of suicides, the amount of people that are sick and dis-ease purely because of what they eat. Again, they just don't know. So the information that's going to be contained within this message is to try and help people. And if you are called, if you are ready in terms of would like to make changes, then there is a way. There really is. It doesn't matter how bad it is. I have seen with my own story, my own journey, the things that I've been able to get beyond, and now tell them as an example as opposed to a warning. The amount of times that I've shared this with people, there's been many, many thousands of people now over the last 6 or 7 years within my work within the Vortex, that when we bring them in, and sometimes it happens in one session, that reconnection, when we remember, obviously you've just got to remember who you are, the reconnection back in, nothing to learn, it's all about remembering. Once we remember who we are as an individual, once we reconnect back into the self, we can then reconnect with each other, and then eventually through meditation is to reconnect back to the divine. I believe that's a huge part of it. I believe that's a big part of the problem we face just now, is our separation from all that is divine. And my intention is to bring it back. Simple as that. My intention is to bring all of that back, a different way of living that makes things better. Very, very simple. That's what my work is all about, and that's what this Godcast is going to be about. It's about bringing light into the darkness. It's about bringing answers and bringing solutions in a time when I believe they are sorely needed. So if this work is for you, please stay tuned. There's going to be a lot more to come. It's going to be, I think it's a solo. Is it a solo cast to call it? Where I'm going to be talking a lot about my own journey in more detail. I'm going to be talking a lot about specific experiences that I've been through and how I got beyond them. Always the solutions. And then also, I'm going to be bringing people in. I've got some really cool pals. I've got some really cool friends that have been through this work and are using these tools and techniques that are enabling them to make sense and make peace within themselves and make sense of their life and get to that place that I believe is available to all human beings, which is to fulfill your potential, to come and get in this lifetime what you came to get. I believe we have a divine mission, a journey that's placed in every single one of us. There's a really good chance you actually sign up for it before you come. You get to decide before you come. And, for me, to get to the end of your life and to live with regrets, or to look back and realise that you never made it, or you didn't get there, you didn't get everything that you came to get. Maybe that's what reincarnation's all about. I don't know. I don't really know too much about that, but maybe that's why you get a chance to come back and get it again. And for me, it's all about fulfilling that potential. It's all about the direct experience and the realisation of just how incredible we human beings are. And I don't believe there's anything missing. And I do believe all of your answers are inside you. I don't have your answers. I have the ability through my work to create the space to get you back inside yourself, to reconnect back into your heart, to reconnect back into your soul. And once we get quiet, once we learn about meditation and know what meditation is, and to be able to sit in silence, which means you need to switch off your nervous system, which means you need to get out of your head and calm down the mind. It isn't a thinking-based game, meditation, it's a feeling-based game. So once we can reconnect you back into your heart and back into your soul, then the journey begins, the internal journey, back to the way it was meant to be. And the way is the way. The divine way, in alignment with God, whatever that means to you. For me, it's consciousness, the field, this field of infinite possibilities where nothing can ever go wrong, and taking this world back to the way it's meant to be. That's my plan. That's my intention. I'm expecting some resistance. I'm expecting some haters. I'm expecting some people to basically, to do whatever they need to do to try and stop that. And that's just the way it is. I'm just going to continue to do what I do, help as many people as I can, bring the light into the darkness, and try and fix this the best that I can. That's the intention. So thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for tuning in. I look forward to seeing you again soon. God bless you. God bless yours. Onwards, inwards and upwards for the greatest good always. All glory to God. Darkness to light is a plan. And bye for now. Done.